Hello, hello. Okay. Muy buenas tardes, muy buenas noches. We're going to go ahead and get started. All right. So we're going to get started with our budget hearing for revision number 2 of the 24-25 maintenance and operations and district additional system budgets. And Mr. Mann, I will go ahead and turn it to you.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. This is kind of routine, but there's some interesting twists and turns. And I'm speaking slowly to give Ms. Shapiro a second here to get her presentation up and running. And with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Shapiro to walk us through the budget revision.
Thank you. Madam President, Governing Board Member, Superintendent Mann, I am presenting tonight the fiscal year 2024-25 revised budget number 2. We've discussed this a couple of times in our budget conversations that in October, the Arizona Department of Education does notify us if we are in a situation that requires a December budget revision. This is in accordance with ARS 15-905E. We did receive a letter from the Arizona Department of Education stating that our district budget was exceeding the limit by $494,000 and approximately, and that a revision was required. So some of the factors that do require us to do a budget revision typically in a budget year is that we don't necessarily know our final budget balance carry forward when we bring our initial adopted, proposed and adopted budget. This year with our revision number 1, we did make that update to our numbers. Also, another area that can impact the and require a budget revision is that our final year-end calculation of our student data isn't necessarily completed when it comes time to gather data in October, which is what they review in order to determine if we need a budget revision. This year in October, we did have some minor student data, and our free and reduced price lunch data was not available in our student data information due to a couple of reasons. Specifically our SPED preschool data, there were some complications in getting that uploaded to the Arizona Department of Ed. We work with a student management system. That system has to collaborate and talk to the Arizona Department of Ed system, and sometimes we will have some issues with that. Our IT department and our vendor worked diligently to ensure that that student data was updated in November. Fortunately, it was not in time for the October review. The other piece that really impacted the budget was that ADE revised the rules for submitting the free and reduced price lunch data, student data. Because of that, it didn't give our vendor time to make updates on their end to ensure that that data would upload properly. They have been working with us. And again, the problem has been resolved. That was resolved in December, and those counts are now showing up in our budget numbers. Again, because they were not in our numbers in October, it has required a budget revision as per Arizona statute. So those were the reasons for our December revision. In May, when we bring a budget revision back to the board, that's when those numbers will be updated and our final budget numbers will be corrected. That's all I have.
And before I turn it over to any board members for comments or questions, Ms. Juarez, do we have any public comments? Okay, perfect. Board members, do we have any questions or additional comments? All right.
I was just going to say thank you for everything and explaining all those adjustments. And this is so small, but under comments on your first page, it says steamed on YouTube instead of streamed.
Oh, I will correct. Thank you.
All right, awesome. Thank you. And that will, since we have no questions or comments, that will conclude our budget hearing portion of today's meeting. And we could go ahead and get started with our regular board meeting. The Creighton School District understands that our community of schools is located on the ancestral land of the Otham Druid and Akimel Otham people who descended from Hohokam and have inhabited these lands since time immemorial. The Otham, whose name translates literally to people, are a vibrant culture and communities spanning countless of generations into the past, continuing to thrive in the present, and carrying a powerful legacy for generations into the future. With this acknowledgement, the Creighton School District formally recognizes that the traditional care and keeping of these lands by Indigenous people is an aspirational model of community stewardship that we are committed to honor with practices, policy, and human relations. Next agenda item, 1C, is a roll call. We have everybody here, Mr. Mann, Ms. Gibson-McLean, Ms. Ayers, myself, Ms. McSheffrey. I shouldn't have said Mr. Mann.
No, you forgot Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh, my bad. Mr. Dupin or Dr. Dupin, can you please lead us in the pledge? Thank you, Ms. Juarez.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. That brings us to our roll call. Ms. Gibson-McLean, Ms. Ayers, myself, Ms. McCaleb, and Ms. McSheffrey. We want to welcome everyone to tonight's meeting and remind the audience of the request to address board cards that must be submitted to the board secretary if you wish to speak to an agenda item. Board policy provides for 2 cards, white cards to be submitted in order to speak to a specific agenda item, and blue cards to be submitted in order to speak during public comments. Due to the open meeting law, board members are not allowed to address items that are not on the agenda. White and blue cards can be found on the left side by the coffee pot. All right, I move the governing board approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Also, since we just did our adoption, or we just had our budget hearing, I move the governing board adopt the revised number 2 total aggregate school district budget per ARS 15-905 and specifically 15-905E1 for fiscal year 24-25.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Awesome, thank you. That brings us to 3A. We're going to do a special recognition of our outgoing governing board members. Do we have any public comments for the specific agenda item? Okay. The administration and governing board would like to, with great sincerity, recognize the following outgoing governing board members for the service that they have given to the children and community of the Creighton Elementary School District. We have Amy Ms. McSheffrey, January 1st of 2015 through December 31st of 2024. That is 10 years of service. Ms. Lindsay McCaleb, January 1st, 2021 through December 31st, 2024, 4 years of service. It has been a great honor working with both of you. I ran a slate the first time I ran with Ms. McCaleb and Ms. Ayers. It's been an amazing 4 years, even though through our discussions, differences, alignments, and it's beautiful that for the past year, we've been able to get on board and making sure that we're always putting our students first. Ms. McSheffrey, I want to thank you for every single time that when it was hard for some of us to say the things that maybe we didn't really want to see, you have always brought an amazing perspective and always pushed for what's best for the district. And for that, I can never thank you enough. I would like to give this time to Ms. McSheffrey or Ms. McCaleb and any other board members if they have any comments or if you have any last words to say. Because it is our last meeting of the year. I'm sure we'll be seeing you guys around. Ms. McCaleb?
Did you want us to talk first and then you guys have?
Yeah, that's fine.
I'll go because you might have more than me. I can't believe I've been here for 2 years already. I was just thinking, oh, wow. But it feels like I just got here, but probably that's because the work has been, I wouldn't say easy, but good. And so kind of just echoing everything Sophia has said, you both have such very strong perspectives in and rooted in kind of your backgrounds and why and your why always. And I think that shows through in how you show up on the board every day. And I think, Lindsay, you've been invaluable as Heather in making sure that we have teacher voice on this board, and even if it isn't somebody currently working in the district, but folks who really get it. And I think, just again, Amy, obviously you slogged through some years on some boards with some interesting characters. And so I think that, you know, it's hard to survive some of those situations and feel like you're speaking, and I hope you feel confident in leaving where we're at right now. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gibson McLean. Ms. Ayers?
Lindsay, I've always appreciated your insights. And I am so happy that we ran together and that we've become such great friends, and just really value our friendship. Amy, thank you for all the time that you've put on the board. I know we always didn't see eye to eye, but I really feel that we always did have the best interest of the kids in our hearts, even if we didn't agree on everything. So thank you.
Mr. Mann or Dr. Dupin, if anybody else wants to say anything before I turn it over.
Give me a microphone in a couple of minutes. I'm happy to contribute. I'll start, Ms. McSheffrey, with you. I just want to thank you for 10 years of service. I think you have watched so many of us grow as school leaders. You've contributed to our growth with your critical thought partnership, your encouragement, your great questions, and you have been a tireless advocate for excellence in Creighton School District. And we have worked through some stuff, and we are grateful. Creighton is positioned well because of your leadership, and the legacy that you leave is vast. And my hope for you is that as you take your final bow tonight, that you can look back on these 10 years of service and recognize the wonderful contributions that you have made to all of us, to our students, and that's going to go on for generations. Thank you so much. Lindsay, we have worked together in so many different capacities during your time in the district. I remember working close. I've observed you teach. I've watched you try so many cool, innovative practices. We worked in design studio together. You helped us build the infrastructure that has become the curriculum and instructional resource tools that we have today. And always creative, always innovative, always ready to try new things, and always seeking to put children first and to help us grow as an organization. So you too leave your legacy of leadership on all of us who remain, on the generations of, or the kids who've been here, and the generations of students that will come in the future through our doors. So thank you for your kind-hearted leadership. You're modeling, both of you, for your years of service. And I just want to say, especially now where it feels like the rule of law, the role of policy, the foundations of democracy are challenged every day. You know, local school boards, this model of governance where local communities make decisions for themselves through their elected officials is hard work. And it's to me never been more important that we have excellence in board leadership to really show how democracy can function for the betterment of a community, and you've really embodied that. So thank you both so very much for your service to the Creighton community.
Ms. McSheffrey, I would love to give a list of all the amazing partnerships you've helped us form over the years, but I would miss them all. So I'm just gonna share one in particular because it came up today. We were talking about an opportunity we have to potentially have a new partner to bring more music into the district. And one of the things in our conversation that Dr. Dupin brought up was, well, we already have a model for this because of the partnership that we have with Phoenix Boys Choir. That was one of the many connections that you've made for us, but that have had a pretty deep impact on opportunities for students within our district. So, you know, beyond the partnerships, you've been a tireless advocate for the community, for what's right. And I've appreciated the combination of not only your support, but your willingness to challenge me to help me push harder and further, I think has been really, really important over the years. And so thank you very much for all of that. I think you've really helped this district move forward in ways that we might not have had we not had your support here as a governing board member. Ms. McCaleb, you always say I have the story wrong. I still believe you pushed me out of my chair and took over the spreadsheet from me back in the day. So it didn't actually push. There was no violence involved. But, you know, it's been a pleasure to work with you as a teacher in the district, as somebody who was a member of our capital team that helped us not only with passing the bond that we passed in 2016, but also with the bond that we just recently passed as well. A lot of that work is kind of outgrowth from that earlier work. There's a connection there between you and Ms. McSheffrey, who helped pass our prior bond to that and helped us get our first M&O override in a number of years and capital override. And as a community, because of both of your hard work, we've been able to maintain all of those funding sources for the district. And as funding in Arizona, you know, we're 51st out of 50 states. We're not likely to get anywhere near the national average anytime soon. And as much as we hate the local taxpayers having to help out, you've helped create value for the local taxpayers to be confident in helping out. In addition to that, I remember you were a member of our Teachers Association. And while we are streaming this meeting today live from this boardroom, there was a time when you were the one with the handheld webcam here to stream the meeting from the boardroom. So as a board member, you've helped our thinking, you've brought your professional knowledge to bear, and it's been super helpful to me in my first year and a half as a superintendent to have someone with your depth of knowledge as a classroom teacher and your time as a principal to fall back on for wisdom and guidance. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McCaleb, do you have any words to say?
I'm gonna try. My goal tonight was to not cry on the dais, not making promises. As Ms. Ayers and Ms. Creo stated, we ran a slate together in a pandemic. So I decided in the February of 2020 to try and go for an appointment, didn't get it, and said, I'm gonna run. And then, you know, the world fell apart. So what a journey with the two of you running, and then with Ms. McSheffrey as we navigated 2020 and 2021 as a board. Very challenging, but very rewarding in all that was accomplished. It's been a privilege to serve on the board for the past 4 years, on top of my 5-6 years working in the district prior to that. For those of you that were listening back in this past February when I announced I wasn't rerunning, for the record, while it was a hard decision to make, I am glad because I already have 2 night classes next semester that would have been a conflict. But I have learned so much, and you will not be getting rid of me. I plan on finding ways to continue to stay involved in the community through committees and whatnot. And I'm super excited to welcome our new board members and watch all of the amazing work. I watch a lot of board meetings and read a lot of news about school boards, and part of why I ran in the first place was seeing some dysfunction on the board as a staff member. And so to be leaving with what I feel is truly aligned, cohesive, strength of coming together and working so closely with our amazing new superintendent, not new anymore really, but I'm just really proud of all the work this board has done, the cabinet, all of our administrators, all of our teachers, all of our staff. Just thank you all for doing everything you do for this community.
Thank you. Ms. McSheffrey?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for those kind words to everybody. You know, this is not a secret that this has been a frustrating position for me, but it's been rewarding too. I feel like I am leaving the board and the district in a better place today. And we had a nice conversation in executive session just about how I think this board is in a really great position with Mr. Mann leading the way as our superintendent, because I haven't seen the board so aligned really since I've been on the board. So it's really refreshing and relieving. And I think that's going to continue with our new board members that are coming in. I'm happy to be leaving the board in this position. And I think we're making progress. It's not always as fast as we want it, but I see progress. And so I'm really grateful for everyone coming on board with the SOFG, because I think that's going to get us where we want to be, and while still recognizing all of the challenges that live outside the goals in the guardrails. So, it's been a privilege. I want to say the kids at Creighton are, as capable, as smart, the smartest kids that I have seen, as my kids were growing up. So they are capable of doing everything that every other kid in any other district are in. So please have faith in them and, give them grace for when they're, misbehaving or doing whatever that they shouldn't be doing for whatever reason. But I have 100% confidence that we're going to see some growth here in the next year or so. And I'm excited to hear about it. So please keep me posted on all of that. And thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Certificate and a gift.
Oh, yes.
Oh, and I
of
better still get
course.
8th grade promotion dates because I still have forever my student, forever my kid. So still have a few more years of those 8th grade.
You guys get a certificate and a nice, quiero que lo abran. Open it. Open it.
Ooh.
It's an engraved. That way you can never forget about Creighton.
Thank you.
Plus, if anything through the pandemic, you have to stay hydrated.
Thank you guys so much for your service. And I hope that this is not the last time you guys are engaged. You guys are invaluable and we want to see you guys. Thank you. All right, that moves us over to our next item, which is 3B. And I'm so excited about this. We have two whole new board members that will be joining us, and incumbent Miss Ayers that got reelected to another 4 years. So at this time, we would like to take the opportunity to publicly swear in the newly elected governing board members for a term of office to be 3 4-year terms for January 1st, 2025 to December 31st, 2028. After the swearing in, I will take a 15-minute recess. If you guys want to take pictures with your families up here in the dais, whatever you guys want to do, congratulate each other, we'll do that. And then after the 15-minute break, we'll come back and continue with our agenda. Ms. Juarez, do we do this up here in the front?
You could, and then I have each one of their oath of office, and we also have a notary here. We have Maria Jimenez here, so after they're sworn in, they can go over to the back counter and she can notarize their signature on the oath of office. I do need this back because I need to send it to the Maricopa County, and then we'll get you a copy.
Perfect. And then if we can have all three just come up here, I'll meet you guys at the podium down here and we can start with Miss Ayers.
Feel like it's been like a quiet church service so far, and so don't be alarmed. You can make noise in this room, so if you want to clap for somebody or you're happy, please share. We're not, yeah.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah. If you want to move over like this, yeah, so they can see. All right. And you're just going to repeat after me, okay? State of Arizona, County of Maricopa, I, Heather Ayers,
I, Heather Ayers,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution
and the Constitution and laws of the state of Arizona,
and the Constitution and laws of the state of Arizona,
that I will bear true faith
that I will bear true faith
and allegiance to the same
and allegiance to the same,
and defend them against all enemies,
and defend them against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
and domestic,
and that I will faithfully and impartially
and that I will faithfully and impartially
discharge the duties of the office
discharge the duties of the office
of Governing Board Member of Creighton Elementary School District Number 14.
of
Governing Board
Governing
Member
Board Member of Creighton Elementary School,
according to the best of my abilities,
according to the best of my abilities,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Yay! All right, Miss Nicole Marquez. All right. I, Nicole Marquez,
I, Nicole Marquez,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution and laws of the state of Arizona,
and the Constitution and laws of the state of Arizona,
that I will bear true faith
that I will bear true faith
and allegiance to the same
and allegiance to the same,
and defend them against all enemies,
and defend them against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
and that I will faithfully
and that I will faithfully
and impartially discharge
and impartially discharge
the duties of the office
the duties of the office
of Governing Board Member
of Governing Board Member
of Creighton Elementary School District Number 14,
of Creighton Elementary School District Number 14,
according to the best of my abilities,
according to the best of my abilities.
so help me God.
So help me God.
Hey, Mr. Tristan. I, Tristan H. Jones,
I, Tristan H. Jones,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution and laws of the state of Arizona,
and the Constitution and laws of Arizona,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the same
to the same,
and defend them against all enemies,
defend them against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
and that I will faithfully
and that I will faithfully
and impartially
and impartially
discharge the duties of the office of Governing Board Member
discharge the duties of the Governing Board Member
of Creighton Elementary School District Number 14,
of Creighton Elementary School District 14,
according to the best of my abilities,
according to the best of my abilities.
so help me God.
So help me God.
Yay!
Do we want to do a picture with the board members?
Yeah. We can have
I don't think they sound so enthused.
And I call for the 15-minute recess now. We have like 5 minutes left and we can go get started.
She was for. Rebecca Gow used to be in charge of it. She still is.
I know. All right, thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and reconvene. That brings us to item 3C, which is governing board reports. And we're going to go ahead and get started with Ms. McSheffrey.
Well, I don't have anything more to say other than what I said before. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McCaleb?
I was saying nothing other than to all the staff. I hope you survive the next, what do you have, a week and a half-ish?
8 days.
8 days. All right. Sorry, I'm spoiled right now. I'm not on a regular school year calendar this year. It feels weird. And truly take some time to relax and enjoy the holidays with your families and your friends.
Thank you, Ms. McCaleb. Ms. Gibson McLean?
We just met for our advisory committee yesterday, and had a fun conversation. And we're coming right back next Monday. So where we get really putting the work in, folks. So again, for your viewing pleasure on YouTube, or come and join us in person if you want to hear about student conduct policies that we're revising and discussing. Just excited for the work that we're continuing to do in that committee. And hopefully we'll grow that into other areas as well. Yes, 8 days. That's very exciting. I used to recall what it felt like leading up to winter break, and I can only commiserate and hope that everyone makes it in one piece. And trying to think of what else. Very pleased with our dismissal of the lawsuit that was brought against us. I know other people probably have more eloquent things to say, but given that I'm from here, you know, you can't bring somebody up from Scottsdale up in East Phoenix and try to beat us. It ain't going to happen. So I'm very pleased with the results. And so I just think it's the right outcome. And I know that there'll be an appeal. I'm certain that there will be. I'm also certain that the arguments that our legal team made were strong. And also, I think that the precedent that it sets, given if people aren't aware of the specifics of the statute, in kind of enumerating a unique way to find standing in court that's not really seen in any other part of our state statutes or constitution, or really recognized in common law of any state, to just be able to have standing to anyone. I think that if we're continue to be successful on appeal, it'll really narrowly define how that statute is enforced in the future, and only to our benefit, because it will survive attacks like this, which are baseless and unwarranted, and continue to let these programs thrive as they should. I'm happy for our students. I'm happy for our families. I'm happy for our community. And I'm most pleased that we've stayed united as a board and as an administrative team in knowing that these programs are great for our communities and our kids, and that the right thing to do is to keep them going, even if we're facing consequences 1 or 2 times, or even if we see it again. We're still going to be ready to fight that. And so I'm just happy with the outcome, and I appreciate everyone's kind of unwavering support of these programs and them continuing within our district.
Thank you, Ms. Gibson McLean. Ms. Ayers?
Good evening. I just want to take a second to thank the community for re-electing me into this position. I'm really happy to continue on with the work that we've been doing. I really enjoy seeing a different side of education. So I've done a lot of different roles in education, and this is something completely different. So it kind of gives me a 360 view. And I really am happy that we're continuing with the SOFG framework. I really do truly believe in it, and think that that our kids are going to benefit from it. Yeah, 8 days, I'm totally counting. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I want to count down the hours because like I feel like everybody is really just needing this break. So I'm really looking forward to this break. And I hope that the rest of the staff has a great holiday during the 2 weeks. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ayers. Just for me, I'm going to double down on what Ms. Gibson McLean stated. I am so happy that the dual language lawsuit was dismissed, and I'm so thankful for our governing board members for standing strong. At the end of the day, we do represent the vision of the community, and I know that dual language is a very much loved and wanted parent choice, you know, using the same terms that Mr. Horn likes to talk about, parent choice. And I am so happy that that happened and that the governing board stayed steadfast. I know of other districts that have ended their dual language programs in their districts because of whatever reasons, if they were, I don't know. But I'm just so thankful for our governing board members that said, no, this is what our community wants. This is what's best for our students, and we're going to hold steadfast and just bring it on. So bring it. Also, I was so happy and pleased to hear that some of our administrators and coaches have gone through the SOFG training. I know that it is very hard work, but I will always double down on the student outcomes part, that we are here to make sure that our students are thriving and that they have the tools that they deserve to succeed in any aspect of themselves. It takes a huge mindset change to jump onto something like that, and it's much needed. It is the adults in the, in the environment that make it or break it for these students. Our students are capable, and we talk about parallel processing a lot. And whatever our adults in the institution are parallel processing down to our students is imperative. So I'm thankful to all those who are doing the work, and to those who need a little bit more mindset work. I hope that you take that opportunity and get on it so we have the best outcomes for our students. And that is all for me. We're going to go ahead and turn it to our superintendent report, Mr. Mann.
Thank you, Madam President. One thing I wanted to note is that on our consent agenda tonight, should the board approve him, we have Mr. Dominic Ruth, who's being recommended for Director of Finance, and he's not with us tonight because he's ill. So I just I didn't want anyone to think he didn't show, and also wanted to, if he happens to be watching, wish him to get well quickly, because we have a lot of work for him here in the district, assuming the board approves his role here in the district. So in addition to that, I have some really exciting news that I don't think we've had a chance to share in a board meeting yet, but some of these things feel like they were 1,000 years ago, even though it was probably 2 weeks. But our Monta Vista soccer team not only took first place in the district, but they took first place in the IDAC tournament. So
Hey, Blue Devils. I'm a Blue Devil.
well, and that IDAC tournament is basically an inter-district competition among some of the districts that are part of the Phoenix Union grouping. And so it's typically pretty competitive. So it's a pretty big win for our Monta Vista Blue Devils. And I didn't go back to check the record, but I'm kind of wondering if that might be our first place win in that tournament. So it's pretty cool. And I know everyone shared a little bit about, winter break is upon us. I've been trying to share a message out with a lot of people, and I apologize, but I'd like to share it here tonight. The holidays are a truly delightful time, but they're also a time that can be very much filled with stress, right? There's a lot of pressure on people. It's the time where, if there's family illness or tragedy, it really kind of comes back to us again. And so it can also be a very stressful time. And so two things that I'm trying to be mindful of that I would like to share with others is that, as that stress comes upon us, it is very easy for us to transfer it to others. Stress is very contagious. And so my encouragement is for us to try to bring a sense of calm to each other rather than a sense of stress. And to also be very aware that for our students, we get very excited about, we've worked so hard all semester and now there's a period of break. But for our students, very often it is a time of stress because their safe place might be our schools. And so the place where they get their meals from, the place where they have safety and comfort is very, very often within our buildings and within our doors. So my thoughts go out to them. I know we have support systems within the district to help with support during the break, but it's always a concern that I have. And one of the things that I'd like to just kind of reiterate is that for our staff, if you're feeling stress at this time of year, we do have an employee assistance program that's there to help support you. And for staff, students, and community, we do have a partner in Care Solace that can help with getting people connected with support services that they may need. And so I just kind of wanted to give a shout out for that as well, because very often when you're at that point of stress or strain, it's difficult to start thinking about where you might get support. So it's always important to be aware of it before the need arises. So with that, I will stop blathering on and pass it back.
Thank you, Mr. Mann. And I apologize. I forgot two important things. One of them is I want to give a big shout out to our facilities team. I know that we're about to end the tree plantings of the grant that we got. I think LCK is the last school this Friday. So I was able to attend one of them. 32 trees were planted, and it's just amazing because a lot of our schools are, as you've seen on previous agenda items, square footage is being reduced and we're creating more outdoor spaces for our students. And just the fact that our facilities team is on deck, there to help out with the Arizona Sustainability Alliance too. A big shout out to them because they were the ones that brought the tools. The students got to plant these trees, and it's just amazing seeing the kindergartners, first and second graders do that, because by the time they hit 8th grade, some of these trees are going to be matured, and they were part of that. So huge shout out to the facilities team and to the city of Phoenix for giving us this grant to be able to make our spaces more greener and give their students shade during the summer, because I always think it's crazy that when it snows, like in Chicago, people will stop school because they're snowing, but we don't stop school because of the heat advisories that we have here. So shade and trees are hugely important for that. So thank you. And thank you to all the principals for working, because I know it takes a lot of, especially with the solar panels that are going in, there's a lot of stuff going on, and still making the time to make sure that everybody arrives safely, comes back and forth for this to happen. I was very pleased to see that. And
the best facilities.
Yes, we do have the best facilities team ever. I will double down on that. And also, I was in one of our schools and I experienced what teachers calling out and having no subs looks like. And I just want to double down on the administrators and teachers. I saw teachers taking in extra kids from other classes. I was there to volunteer for something else. And then I was helping, take all the kids everywhere to their designated areas. And it really takes a village. So it's beautiful to see how schools really take part in that community, and we all just take care of each other so our students can be, well. So I really thank those teachers that took all those extra kids on top of their class and trying to maintain everything. I know it's really hard work. I could never do it. That's why I'm not an educator, but it's beautiful to see it, because I know that the majority of our people here are really for their students and not their self-interest. So I just want to give a big shout out to that. And yes, hopefully you get the must rest that you guys need coming on this winter break. Thank you. All right, that brings us to 4A, which is our student outcomes focused governance update. We will be talking about progress monitoring report goal 1 and 2 and guardrail number 1. So in fall of 2023, Creighton School District adopted a student outcomes focused governance SOFG framework to ensure the focus on improving student outcomes. The infographic that we have on the agenda that anybody can access provides information on SOFG and describes the initial efforts that the district has taken to implement this framework. The SOFG framework is based on the idea that student outcomes don't change until adult behaviors change. Using SOFG, the Creighton School District Board aims to create conditions that support improving student outcomes. The SOFG framework is structured around 6 research-informed competencies: vision and goals, monitoring and accountability, unity and trust, guardrails, communication and collaboration, and continuous improvement. The vision and goals describe the community's vision for the future direction of the school district. They distinguish between inputs, outputs, and outcomes, and pertain only to student outputs and outcomes. And our goals are SMART formatted, meaning that they are specific, measurable, attainable, result-focused, and time-bound. Our guardrails are based on community values and the strategic plan, vision, and goals. They identify specific actions that the district leaders may not use or allow in pursuit of the district's student outcome goals. And they do not undermine the district's ability to meet goals, but often require leaders to accomplish them in a different way. Up here, we have our goals and our guardrails for everybody to see, and we also have them on the agenda. And we're going to be doing our progress monitoring reports. We're going to be going through our progress monitoring report. And you may ask, what is a progress monitoring? It is a conversation between the school board and superintendent that provides boards the opportunity to evaluate the alignment between the community's vision, goals towards student outcomes, and the school's district's reality, the current student performance or growth. While student outcomes, goals, and current student performance may not match perfectly, it only becomes problematic when there is no evidence of student growth and progress. And even if students aren't yet growing and making progress, that's only catastrophic if the superintendent doesn't have sufficiently aggressive strategies in place for increasing growth and helping students make progress. In addition to clarifying student and superintendent performance monitoring, when done well, it confers several other organizational benefits. It's lead by example, it clarifies strategies, it communicates expectations so we're all on the same page, and it creates a formative evaluation. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get started with our SOFG Goal 1 Progress Monitoring Report. And I will turn it over to either Mr. Mann or Dr. Dupin for this presentation.
I'm just going to give a quick frame and then turn it over to Dr. Dupin. But I think just kind of marking our progress as a team, this is actually, while this is progress report 2 for goal 1, this actually marks the very first time that we not only have sort of our pre-data, but we actually have a point in time of progress towards looking at outputs, right? Or sorry, towards looking at outputs, which are intended to be predictive of our outcomes. And so it's kind of a milestone for us. It's our first time with that. And then upon completing goal 1 report 2 and goal 2 report 2, we have our very first guardrail report and our first guardrail 1 progress report. And so just kind of wanted to note that because I think it's important as we're working through our first year of having all of the components of the student outcomes focused governance framework up and running. And that may have been a little bit of an overreach because I'm not sure we have all the components yet, but most of the major components. And so with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Dupin to walk us through progress monitoring report for goal 1, report 2.
Thank you, Superintendent Mann, President Carrillo, members of the governing board, and fellow members of executive team and community. Just a reminder that goal 1 is focused on decreasing minimal proficiency in mathematics for all 8th grade students. The goal is that the percent of 8th grade students that score minimally proficient on AASA math will decrease from 73% in August of 2023 to 48% by August 2028. So that is our expected outcome. We're monitoring progress along the way. This year, our annual target based on, and this graph shows all of our expected annual outcomes for the duration of the goal. This year's annual target is that the percent of 8th grade students that score minimally proficient on AASA math will decrease from 77% in August of 24 to 71% by August of 25. So progress along the way. We shared last time as these were developed, we have a current measure and an interim measure. Our current measure is looking at the group of students who are in that grade currently. So our current 8th graders. Our interim measure is the kids who are going to be making progress. This year they're in 5th grade. Those 5th graders are the 8th graders of 2028. And so we'll be monitoring their progress along the way and development as well. We use 2 data sources for this goal and for the interim measure. The primary data source is the AASA state assessment. There's also, we use our DNA benchmarking assessment for the interim measures. And I will say that there is some talk, just as a awareness for all of us, there's some talk at the state board about making some adjustments to the standards and the state assessment that would be aligned to that. The current conversation is around, right now we have a comprehensive set of standards. The conversation is about creating power standards or focus standards within each content area. This could have a pretty dramatic effect on the state test moving forward. This is some years in development, but the conversations are starting and they're really starting to get attention. So I can't predict at this point in time how this may affect our progress and metrics, but it'll be part of our conversation.
That was going to be my question. Yeah.
If they change this, right now we're fortunate in that the blueprint, so we can build a set of expected goals and annual targets in like form. So if that changes dramatically, we may have to relook at some of our targets. We will also have to be very mindful of how cut scores are established for each of the proficiency levels. But if that happens, or if as the conversation evolves, we'll continue to bring that information forward to all of you, keep you informed so we can respond accordingly. So this is the breakdown for current measure 1.1 for this year's 8th grade students. This is the breakdown of students who scored minimally proficient in math on interim benchmark 1. This is the assessment that our students took. The pre-assessment is right away in August. Interim benchmark 1 was taken in October. So all the data we're talking about with this interim measure were collected in October. Our students are getting ready. I believe on Monday, they start interim benchmark 2. So we'll have a whole new set of data for the upcoming round of progress reports. But this is looking at quality of life back in back in October. When we scan across all of our schools, you can see that the rate of minimal proficiency ranges from 81% at Biltmore Prep. The rest of the schools are kind of clustered between 93 and 95% up to 100%. So there's still very much work to do in that with that subgroup. So the current measure of 8th grade students, again, with that interim benchmark measure, there is some success to report. At the time of the interim benchmark 1, we were at 95% of students scoring minimal proficient. And when we work with these, we're always looking for places where there has been some change for the positive. And so what we notice here is that this proficiency level at 95% minimal proficient is actually lower than it was in the prior 2 school years when interim benchmark 1 was at 97%. So it's early to call that a trend, but it is a glimmer of positivity in this work, which is going to be representative of incremental progress. So in our analysis, we highlight that change, the fact that minimal proficiency level is lower. We know that our rate of students who scored minimally proficient decreases pretty substantially. In 22-23, we went from 97% at the end of interim benchmark 1, and I do have a little pointer going on the screen, so kind of keeps my thinking on track, if that helps. I don't know. 97% minimal proficiency after interim benchmark 1, that went all the way down to 83%. That's a 14% decrease. Last year, we went from 97%, again, interim benchmark 1, down to 79. So being that we are at 95%, we need to get a decrease of 18% to reach our current measure for this year. We are making the determination at this time that we are currently on track to reach the current measure 1.1. We also want to call out some schools where we're seeing some favorable progress. And Papago, they had a decrease of minimal proficiency of 7%. So this, we don't have the answers to this at this time, but we are curious about what is happening with that set of practices, with those conversations with those students, in order to see if there's things that we can learn that can be beneficial across the district. The Gateway had a decrease of 4% minimal proficiency, and Loma Linda had a decrease of 1%. Interim measure 1.2 focuses now on our 5th grade students. Again, these are the students who will be 8th graders in 2028. Again, you can see the proficiency, the ranges of minimal proficiency are actually a bit higher for 5th graders, ranging from 93 at the low end, all the way again to 100%, with all the schools being at 90% or above. Another thing I want to remind us all of is that these assessments, the kids haven't really seen all the standards. They haven't had the opportunity to learn all the standards at the expected level of depth until they take the post-test. So there's still a lot of really new information for the kids when they are responding to questions on the interim benchmark 1, especially. So in this situation, what we see is that our October 2024 rate of 5th graders scoring minimally proficient was at 96% on IBM 1. That's actually a little higher than it was in prior years. So it's a little, it's different than what we saw with our 8th grade students. When our 4th graders finished the year, at the end of, when they finished 4th grade, they were at 86% minimal proficiency. So they came into 5th grade with a little bit less of the prior knowledge that is needed to really demonstrate mastery in these standards. So we have a lot of ground to cover with our 5th grade students. However, given the substantial growth made between interim benchmark 1 in 22-23 and the post-test, and in 23-24 between IBM 1 and the post-test, we again are predicting being on track to reach interim measure 1.1 with our 5th grade students. So we have our team, and one of the things, as Superintendent Mann mentioned, with our team progress, a highlight is, when we gave the first report, it was really a very small group of us analyzing the data and working to provide this information. In the time since our last report, we've expanded the group that's working on this considerably. So our entire administrative leadership team has had an opportunity to go through these reports and look at the data, give input, have conversations about what we're sharing tonight. So what we're sharing with you is really reflective of, many voices at this point in time, and there's a much greater awareness, which was one of the things we said last time needed more attention. We needed to put explicit work into ensuring that communication was cascading throughout our organization, all the way to the kids. So we're making that happen. Dr. Pombo is here with members of our teaching and learning coaching team, and that team has been working as well to understand the goals, understand the interim measures, and give input into the analysis as well as the recommendations for changes to the inputs moving forward. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Pombo and her team at this time.
Good evening, President Carrillo and members of the board and Superintendent Mann. First, I'd like to introduce Marie Twist. She's our coordinator for math. So this is Marie.
Good evening. Good to see you again.
And she's going to introduce our math coaches.
We are so lucky to have 4 coaches this year specializing in math and science. And those are Patty Lockwood, Maria Geyer, and Sarah Larkin. Casey Aiken couldn't be with us tonight.
So we're going to share with you what's working, and then Marie will also just fill in whatever I forget to share. So what we've noticed in our learning walks, we've been doing learning walks the first quarter and also the second quarter. The first quarter we did about 190, and then this quarter we're about 150. But we wanted to show you just the math classroom. So just 5th and 8th grade math classrooms, how they are improving in our learning walks. And so if you look at the slideshow, we have with our learning walks, we have 27% of our classrooms in Q1 to 50% of our classrooms in Q2, where they were improving in learning targets. For success criteria, which we talked about in our study session, has also improved from 9% the first quarter to 30% in the second quarter. So that's some of the work that we've been doing with the data-wise process, creating action plans, our leadership teams creating action plans, conducting learning walks, and then providing feedback and coaching from our coaching team. Also, we have one of the 10 teachers participating in Math Cadre in the fifth grade is a fifth grade teacher, and 19 6th through 8th grade teachers completed 10 hours of focused professional development in math instruction. I don't know if Maria, if you want to talk more about.
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. I'd love to. So Math Cadre has been going on in Creighton for several years, and it's an after-school professional development. It's a 2-year commitment. So our teachers that are invited to participate and agree to participate are making a really big investment in themselves as educators and also in their students. We meet monthly for an hour and a half after school. They learn all about deepening their own practice, and particularly in terms of the math standards and the standards for mathematical proficiency. They also participate in collegial coaching cycles where we have release time for subs to come, and they get to go and observe each other, putting the practices into action and giving feedback. It has been larger in the past. One of the things that's been a challenge this year has been that we've lost some of our more experienced teachers. And of our Math Cadre, of our 5th and 8th grade teachers, of our 8th grade teachers, we have 9 across the district. 5 of them have already participated in Math Cadre, which is amazing. And then 2 of them are new to us. 1 of them was on maternity leave. So the rest of our 8th grade team just really has participated or didn't have the opportunity this year. Of our 5th grade teachers, 1 of them is participating in Math Cadre this year, and we're so excited to have her. She works at Monte Vista. She's delightful. 7 of our 5th grade math teachers are new to us this year, and most of them are new to the profession. So that's been something that we're working through. We're really excited about the professional development that teachers have been receiving during our Creighton Professional Learning Days on those Wednesdays, once per quarter. 3rd through 5th grade has been focused on fraction fluency using a concrete, representational, and abstract model. So how do we get materials into students' hands to help them make sense of it and make those connections between what they're holding and the very abstract number crunching? At our 6th through 8th grade, we have a great partnership this year with the Department of Education and their math specialists. So someone is coming out and working with us. They're getting, again, manipulatives into the hands of our middle school teachers so that they can become proficient and confident using those tools so that then they can go back and support their students through those. And then the math coaches and I actually had the opportunity, we spent all day today at a math conference that was put on by Arizona math leaders and the Department of Education called Math Mavericks, where we got to attend 3 2-hour sessions with some of the brightest minds in math education in the country today. So we've already been all abuzz about how can we bring this back to our teachers, to bring back to our students, to start to transform what math instruction looks like in our classrooms.
So what needs more attention? Well, first I wanted to thank the principals and our leadership teams and the coaches and our teachers are all working really hard to meet this goal. And what we found with the learning walk data is that the learning targets and success criteria are improving. And it's coming from the teacher perspective. And the part we're talking about here about engagement and practice is that our students need more opportunities to engage with the learning target and the success criteria. Right now, most of it's coming from the teacher perspective and having the students have an opportunity to practice more. So we talked a lot to the teachers about the students need to be practicing most of the time, either reading, writing, listening, or speaking and collaborating with each other. And so we just need to focus more on the students doing the work. And then the other part was about the curriculum being used less from the first quarter to the second quarter. And as Marie shared, we have a lot of new teachers. And when we had the new teacher orientation, we shared our curriculum, how to use it, how to lesson plan. But as you know, as a new teacher, that was in July. And as we're going through the school year, it takes a lot to remember how to use that curriculum. And so At Kennedy, because we have all of them are new, right? All the new teachers are there. So we had our coaches go in there, our math coaches, and teach them how to use the curriculum and how to write lesson plans and the pacing guides. And so we want to continue that with our other campuses, especially with our new teachers, on how to use the curriculum. Because that's what we're noticing is just not that they don't want to use it, it's just how do you use it and how we can make it accessible for them.
Something that I would add from our last visit when we spoke about the pretest is that since then, a change that we've made is all of our 5th and 8th grade math teachers are now working with a coach. So all of them are working with a coach one-on-one. Most of them are working with one of our math and science coaches. We do have a couple that are still perfecting their foundational teaching skills. And so they're working with our student support coaches on the foundations of classroom management and instruction, routines and procedures, and then collaborating or consulting with our math and science coaches to develop their content knowledge.
I think that's it for now.
One thing I want to point out real quickly when we talk about curriculum use is that the curriculum comprehensively includes several parts. In Creighton, it includes our pacing calendars, which kind of show over time when standards should be taught throughout the year. It includes unit guides, which show how, like, what the standards are, how they're deconstructed, and what the outcomes should be for students while they're interacting with those standards. And then it includes the instructional materials. So in our case, it's Houghton Mifflin Harcourt HMH into math. A lot of times when people talk about curriculum use, they think of just that set of just the instructional materials. So when we're observing during learning walks and having conversations with teachers, we're looking at all 4 of those components. And one of the things that we've observed is that with regard to the pacing calendar, we're halfway through the year. And so the longer the year goes, we're observing a little bit of drift from the pacing calendar. So it's not that the instructional materials aren't being used. It's that they might be 2 or 3 or 4 weeks off of the intended pace that's guided by the pacing calendar. So when you see that decrease, we believe that accounts for some of that. And so we'll want to talk a bit more about what we're planning to do about that. But that is an observation that we've made, is like, as time goes on, this shift is happening. We know the math is hard and it takes time, but also if you stay 4 weeks behind, if you're 4 weeks behind at the halfway point, you're going to be 8 weeks behind, which is almost a whole quarter by the end of the year. And you're not going to be prepared. And that's how you end up with students that are 2 and 3 years behind as the grades progress. So we're keenly aware of that based on this year's observations.
And the other part of the curriculum on the rubric is that it's at the rigor of the standard and the rigor of the curriculum. And sometimes they're using a curriculum, they might be on pace, but it's not the right level of rigor. So that's the other area when we're measuring curriculum use.
Thank you so much. I know that we're going to open it up to questions, but before we get questions, I just want to share that monitoring is about understanding the extent to which reality matches the board's adopted goals, interim goals. Monitoring is never about offering advice or recommendations. Most of the monitoring is about understanding where we are and how we got here. The board's attention is focused on what's true for students, not on what adults are or are not doing. So with that being said, I know that there was some pre-questions set up. If the board did not have an opportunity to pre-ask some questions, we can open it up and ask some questions. Dr. Dupin?
Yes, we are ready to respond. So should we just go through the questions?
Yeah, I think you can go through goal 1, the ones that were pre-made, and then I can open it up to the board members if they have any other questions and they did not have a chance to submit their questions.
Yes, happy to. So one of the things that we were asked was to think through what plans we're putting in place to ensure that we were supporting teachers in effective use of the curriculum. So Dr. Pombo, Mrs. Twist, will you talk about the changes we've made in the support for teachers to effectively use the curriculum?
Yeah, so one of the things we talked about was giving them, providing more professional development on using the adopted curriculum. And we've been doing that on Wednesdays. And so we'll increase that. We also have coaching support. So we have been having our coaches work with our teachers, and we change where they're working more closely with our 5th and 8th grade teachers. So helping them with planning to make sure we're meeting the rigor of the standard. And then obviously regular monitoring in the classroom. So working with our principals when they're doing learning walks. We do learning walks once a quarter at every school, but also the learning walks in between, monitoring the curriculum use. And then in January, we have our leadership seminar. And during that time, we look at all of our data. So we're gonna look at our benchmark assessments. We're gonna look at our learning walk data. And from there, we make action plans and identify a student learning problem. So we look at what are the students not learning, and we create an action plan based on that. During that time, we will talk about how to create an action plan to increase the pace or get back on pace with our units. Because like Dr. Dupin shared, we've done learning walks and they're a month behind, sometimes they're 2 months behind. So how do we get back on track with our pacing guides? Is there anything else you want to add?
I would add that particularly with pacing, that is something that coaches are really familiar with the standards, and they're really familiar with what's most important and what's going to impact their future success, as well as what they need to be learning right this moment or what we would expect them to be learning right this moment. So one of the things that they do when they work with teachers who are behind pace a little bit is to sometimes help them reprioritize, sometimes help them see, you know what, this unit on coins, that'll be a really great one. Let's bump that to the end of the year and let's get back to place value, because we know that your students really need these place value concepts to be able to move forward with the next things. Whereas this particular piece, this could wait until a little bit later in the year. And especially as the students get older and we are a little bit more focused on those outcomes and testing, sometimes it's a matter of looking at what is the key core understanding in 8th grade. In 8th grade, it's expressions and equations. And so statistics and probability, if you were supposed to teach that right now, let's wait. Let's put that one off a little bit longer and let's make sure you have a really foundational understanding, because that's what our high school partners are telling us they care about when these students come in. So that's one of the things that they're able to do to help support teachers, especially newer teachers, because having newer teachers, one of the questions that I got from a newer teacher recently was, how am I supposed to know? How am I supposed to pace it and plan it out if I don't know how long it's going to take? Like, I planned for it and I thought it was going to take me a day and it took me 3 days to teach it, because those are things you just don't know yet. You think that you have it planned out for a 45-minute lesson, and it turns out that you were very mistaken sometimes. So that's one of the things that they help with. They also sit one-on-one with teachers during their prep and plan actual lessons, which sometimes involves, let's look at the lesson and let's get out the manipulatives together. I've sat in on some planning meetings in the last few weeks where the coach was teaching the teacher how to use these tools. Great, let's do some practice problems. Which of these are going to be most beneficial for your students? Because when if teachers aren't comfortable using them, they are not going to get up in front of 12 to 13, 14-year-olds and look foolish and lose their credibility. So our coaches are helping teachers to build their confidence so that then they feel prepared to go and work with their students.
So that speaks to the teacher's role in addressing the curriculum use needs. The second question is about what support systems are being implemented to address the engagement gaps, so the student's role in learning, identified in classrooms to meet the required standards.
Well, it's very similar answer. It's going to be through coaching. I observed actually a coach today working with a teacher on how to engage the students in the standard. And so part of the coaching is that each teacher sets a goal, and then they work with their coach to set up the criteria for that goal. And so they might be thinking about an engagement strategy. How do I engage the students in learning target success criteria? And they set up a checklist, and from there the coach models that. And then the teacher goes over the checklist while the coach is modeling that strategy, and then the teacher tries it. And so it's just going to be a lot through coaching and professional development on engagement strategies and how to engage with the learning targets, how to engage with the success criteria, and how to get students practicing more, reading and writing and talking more about what they're learning.
May I have a follow-up to that? Are we asking any of the kids what engagement looks like to them, or what works or it's not working for them personally as being the student in the classroom?
I think that's a really good idea to talk to the students about what engagement looks like to them. And I think that could be done through teachers, especially with at the end of a lesson, doing a check for understanding or checking with them on engagement.
Okay. So it's not currently being done.
I could say that I know there is one piece of it is that sometimes frequently when our coaches are modeling lessons, they're really trying to work on bringing in student voice to show teachers how powerful it can be. So for example, I know that Mrs. Geyer modeled the lesson recently at Mackin, where at the end of the lesson, she had her students that she was working with reflect on how did turn and talk impact, how did talking about the math impact your learning today? And then the teacher was able to see that, and that was really powerful.
I think things like that are going to obviously benefit our students, obviously critical thinking skills. And then depending on how you're delivering that, obviously can be like literacy too, depending on how you want that feedback given. But I think that's just a great idea. Sometimes when we're talking about these things, it gives me, gives me flashbacks to times when because I felt like as a student, math was I was always behind. I was always trying to stay above water, and it felt like everybody was moving faster. And so I would just hate to see it maybe thought of as engagement necessarily, when there's clearly, and maybe they can't communicate it exactly to you, but I think with all of these prongs all around, there's got to be some way to identify, for some kids, what's going on, even if it's not having to do necessarily with how the curriculum's being delivered. I don't know how to put it exactly, but there's got to be some solution to really get all of these points out there. And so I'm happy to hear about that.
And one of the things that we've been talking about too is that, as we look at trying to correct some of the pacing challenges, the risk that we create as we create urgency around timing is that people tend to revert to their old practices, or they revert to what feels most time efficient to them. And so I think one of the balancing acts for the team as they're working with teachers is going to be to help to continue to model those opportunities for that student voice, for that student engagement, and how to engage the students. But at the same time, while creating that urgency around getting on pace, to not jettison that, because it might be faster to just talk to the students and talk to them twice as fast to get further along,
Yeah.
right? But twice as fast might move you further faster, but not necessarily effectively where the students are being successful with gaining the knowledge and skill sets that they need to be able to have the outcomes that we want to see for them. Bless you.
I just want to, Coach, did we miss anything that you want to add that we're doing to address this? I don't want to put you on the spot. I just don't think there's anything we forgot.
Bless you.
Another teacher.
Yeah, come
on. We're not scary.
Yeah.
I know. Thank you. I was just going to add, another teacher that I was working with, one of the things that she considered was asking students to self-rate themselves in terms of, if you were going to work in a small group with a teacher, what portion of this assessment that I just gave would you need help on? And so just trying to let the students tell the teacher, this is what I think I need help with. And it showed a couple of things, kids who actually knew all the stuff and got it 100% right, but still felt like they didn't know it. So okay, you need to talk to that student because that's just a confidence issue, right? They get it. They just need to know they get it. But then also the students who said, I'm struggling with whatever the concept was. Yeah, you're right, you are. And that's good information for the student to know about themselves and for the teacher to be able to address. So just trying to show teachers that they can do that in a really quick, simple Google form, a really easy way. And their minds are blown with what their kids are telling them. So I think that's just another really good example of how we can help teachers talk to their kids about what they know, what they think they know, what they don't know, and then just start that cycle.
Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that two-way communication, because at times as adults, we're nope, this is how it's going to be, and you guys have no say. And we really do learn a lot from our students on what their needs are versus us trying to input what we think their needs are. So I appreciate that.
And I was going to add, when we talked about the different levels of data, that's the street data, talking to the students, examining their work. And that's one of the areas we want to strengthen, is that street data.
Cool. Awesome. Well, building on that, I'm wondering, there are not curriculum, like example lessons out there, like I know through like CCR frameworks and things that address specifically self-efficacy, and they're quick little like 10-minute things, you know, depending on what the schedules are with morning meeting kind of things. And that might be really powerful to explore, especially like math just tends to be one of those subjects where self-efficacy, if it's low, it tanks really quickly. But I think maybe some other tools like that, and letting our teachers know that it's okay to have, you know, that social emotional learning, right? And that space when we're navigating difficult concepts. So.
Thank you. And in particular, that feedback is helpful because I think so the coaches will be able to get much more granular and much more focused in the planning with teachers. When we do learning walks, it's kind of high level, but one thing we do ask the kids is, what are you learning? If it's appropriate. We don't interrupt direct instruction if it's happening, but if the kids are working and it's appropriate for us to interact with them without creating a disruption, we'll ask, what are you learning? Or more frequently now, tell us about your learning targets and success criteria. And but it's a very different question to ask, what engagement are you using or what engagement would work for you? So that's a tweak I think we could make. It's still pretty infrequent that kids, sometimes they can't. They're starting to be able to more frequently articulate learning targets and success criteria. That's still very much like external to the learner. And now the shift we're making is trying to get it internal. So appreciate the feedback and question.
Did anybody else have, I'm sorry, was that the last question that was submitted?
Yes.
Does anybody have any other questions?
All the questions I had were answered, so thank you. I'm also pumped to hear that Math Cadre is still going strong, because that is a really powerful thing. And I think once, it's great to know how many teachers have already gone through that, and then seeing the partnership between the coaches as far as classroom management while still addressing the content. And I hope that we can continue to push to get some of those newer teachers, once they're ready, into things like Math Cadre as well.
And I think, like, again, just things like that are bonuses to working for a district and having those types of professional development opportunities. So I think that's really great. And I wish we had more than 10 people in it.
When throughout the conversation on all the goals, one of the questions that was recently posed to us, which I think we'll want to keep going with, is how are we going to evaluate the impact of the change in our coaching model? Because we made a really significant change in the model this year. CEA has given us feedback to integrate like satisfaction survey type feedback. And so the team has built a way for people who are participating in coaching now. It's just getting started, right? To be able to give feedback on their coaching experience. That's one piece.
It's a question I was going to ask, but I didn't know if it fit into SOFG, but so I didn't ask it, but I was wondering if that was something that was being considered as a part of the coaching changes.
Yeah, I don't know where it fits either, but it definitely feels appropriate given that our answer to many questions is effective coaching, effective coaching. Well, so we feel a growing obligation to be able to measure the impact of that coaching experience. And we really are going to be tying it to the outcomes, which are the assessment results. And in particular, students in these grade levels are students of teachers who have been receiving specific and ongoing professional development, and we're looking for trends and patterns there. So
we're surveying them now. Right now, we're sending those out to get feedback before the break, so we can make plans in the second half.
Similarly, like for those teachers that are focused more on classroom management, is there some framework for evaluating when they're ready to kind of start getting in more heavy on the content? Because like at some point those kind of go hand in hand, right?
Well, they're doing their impact coaching cycle, so when they reach their goals, but then also the content coaches and the student support coaches are working closely together. So some of the teachers are getting both at the same time, the content and the student support.
Awesome. Do we have any other questions?
I just have a thought. Like, I'm just wondering how we can normalize newer teachers asking for that help when they get that far behind, because I find it troublesome that they're a month behind. I mean, I can see like a couple weeks. I think that's kind of normal. But I'm wondering, like, how can we get our teachers, our new teachers, to say, hey, I'm like drowning, I need help? before they get that far behind.
Or
Because
what
I
kind
feel
of
like
other
that's-
checks are in place? Like I'm assuming
Yes.
lesson plans are submitted and things like that to where it can kind of come to people's attention.
Right. Like, are the principals looking at the lesson plans and seeing, hey, this is where they are and this is where they should be on the curriculum maps? Or are the coaches seeing their lesson plans saying, oh, they should be here, but how can I help them here? I just like, I know that we try to shove so much down our kids' throats, like, and I know it's really hard, I'm sure, for new teachers. I haven't been one for a long time, but and I know it takes time, but that I just feel like we need something in place to make sure that they're not getting that far behind.
Thank you for the feedback. I think it's an excellent question. You know, we try to make the coaching process and the learning walks as collegial and supportive and nurturing as they possibly can be. But that's something I think we need to take back as a team and think through and, you know, talk with some teachers about how to help. I do think a big part of it is noticing, like, hey, I noticed that you're here on the unit guide. Like, we should be here. Like, just having
it
that.
doesn't need to be punitive, but just
Right.
like
No, I
how
don't
can
want it to
we
be
No, no,
ensure
no,
that
no.
there's kind of
Yeah.
a
No.
Are you
a more
seeing
timely
that?
alert before it gets to that point?
Are you seeing that pacing issue pretty consistently across the board for all new teachers, or is it just here and there?
I'll
I don't think it's just new teachers. I think
Okay,
it's-
okay,
no,
I just
it's
wasn't
not
sure.
localized to new teachers.
Okay,
I mean, I'm sure you're still trying to normalize the pacing guides because I know that it's kind of a hard thing to do when you have new curriculum and you're constantly like adjusting those. So I know there's a lot of like factors that play into that.
Well, I was also going to share, Marie's in charge of this too, but the new teachers, she meets with them once a month. So the coaches, do you want to explain that, how the coaches meet with them once a month?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a new teacher cadre this year, which is part of our ongoing commitment to support the professional development of those that are new to the profession. So teachers that are new to Creighton and also in their first 2 years in the profession participate in one-hour session once a month. It is scheduled very close to after their school's dismissal. So on those Mondays, there are 3 separate sessions to accommodate the 3 different release times. And our coaches collaborate on those. Those are really focused on foundational skills for teaching. So, which includes things like learning targets. It's a lot of classroom management. It's a lot of routines and procedures, helping teachers to be successful. And then because it is consistent district-wide for, I believe, the first time this year, it's a district program rather than something that's run at each school. And it's similar, but maybe it's a little bit different, and it kind of depends because it is a district-wide message this year, and the coaches all collaborate in planning it and delivering it. All new teachers are getting that same message and support no matter who their coach is. After sessions, we communicate clearly with principals. This is what your teachers learned last night. Here's who attended. Here's how you can support them. And here's some highlights from their feedback.
Do you have any like mentor programs here as well?
We do. We also have a mentor program that new teachers participate in for their first 2 years in Creighton. I will say that one of the challenges that we've had is having enough mentors. Some of our campuses, we really don't have critical mass of teachers that are in their 3rd, 4th, 6th, 10th year. And so we have some mentors that are mentoring 3 or 4 teachers. We have some mentors that are mentoring teachers that are not on their grade level team, so they don't share a prep. There's some challenges as far as staying after school or being able to meet, but we do have a mentor program. Maria Geyer is our district coordinator for it. She meets with the mentors to train them and support them in how to be a good mentor and how to check in and provide that support. But it's definitely something that we're still looking to grow and expand. We're looking to figure out how we can better support our teachers who are here on H-1 and J-1 visas specifically. So we know that we still have some work to do, but it's very much on our radar.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions for this progress monitoring report? All right. So given this progress monitoring report, if we have no other questions, and if you feel that our questions have been in SMART format and we have asked questions, not necessarily looking at adult inputs, but student outcomes, I move the governing board, we adopt Goal 1, Progress Monitoring Report 2.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you so much for that. And that brings us to our Goal 2 Progress Monitoring Report.
You
Thank
might as well
you.
stay close by because we're gonna. Goal 2 is very similar to Goal 1, but with a very special and important subgroup. Goal 2 is to increase proficiency in math for Black 8th grade students. The percent of 8th grade Black students that score proficient on AASA math will increase from 0% in August 2023 to 28% by August 2028. And I want to just start with an apology. You likely noticed a difference between the materials that you received a week in advance in our governing board update. And then when we published the reports for this evening's conversation, there was a change with this goal. And that is my fault. I transposed a column and I reported a 1% increase in proficiency on interim benchmark 1 for our Black students. And I would say I got caught up in the excitement of seeing a change and I missed it. So fortunately, we have an excellent team and Mrs. Twist brought it to my attention quickly and was like, there are, I think, 30, give or take, students in this group. So a 1% increase would be like 0.3 of a student. That's not possible. So we went back and I'm appreciative for the feedback and apologize to the board for having made that error. It's completely mine. So upon revision of the materials, we bring to you this information. Our focus, our annual target for Black students is to increase proficiency. So we're looking for that graph to go up from 0% in August 2024 to 6% by August 2025. Our current measure for this year's 8th graders is that on the DNA math benchmark, they would increase from 0% in May at the post-test when they were 7th graders to 4% by this May, at the end of this year's post-test. The interim measure for the 5th grade students who will be our 8th graders in 2025 is that they would go from 0% as well to 6% by May of 2025. So again, given the very small totality of this subgroup, we kind of talk in terms of all of our 8th graders. When we look at our school by school breakdown, you can see that the proficiency rate for students in 8th grade is still very, very much clustered together and very, very much at or near 0%. So as we analyze this, we continue to see that there was no change from pre to interim benchmark 1. We therefore report that we are currently not on track to reach current measure 2.1, the 4% by the end of this year. For our 5th graders, again, proficiency there's not the slight range of proficiency for our 5th grade students. Many more schools have a proficiency rate of 0 at this time. So our 5th grade students, again, that rate of proficiency remains at 0% as of interim benchmark 1, and we are currently not on track to meet interim measure 2.2. So we continue to put energy and effort and inputs into the focus on this goal. So a lot of what's been done for our 8th grade students, for our entire 8th grade student and our entire 5th grade student population applies very specifically to these groups as well, to this group as well. But I invite once again Dr. Pombo and Mrs. Twist to share some of the highlights of the work.
Well, this one is very similar. The difference that we did between just the whole 8th grade class and then also focused on our subgroup is that now all of the schools have a list of their students that are that identify as Black to support and follow their data, and also do that street data and find out how we can ensure that connection and belonging. But the number, even some of our coaches are tracking who our students are, so we can see how they're doing, and also during our learning walks, observing in the classroom to see how our Black students are learning in the classroom. So that's just the only main difference between here and the other one. Is there anything else? Or anything else?
I know, Mrs. Twist, you actually are monitoring these students on an individual basis. Is that correct?
Mhm.
So that's how, that was one of the ways when she looked at the initial progress monitoring draft, she's like, this number's wrong, because I know each kid and I know them by name, and I can tell you that the movement isn't there. So that is a strategy, an input that we've added, is to have that direct progress monitoring for those individual students at the district level. Anything else? So what we did here is, and Mrs. Twist and I have had this conversation, to go from absolutely 0% to go from not being proficient on the test. And you may recall when we were looking at the sample test questions during our study session, the test questions are complex. They often are multi-part, so you have to do multiple steps or respond to 2 different parts in order to get credit for the entire answer. So to go from not being able to access or show what you know on that content at the beginning of the year to proficiency is a huge jump for 1 year. Remember when we were talking about that? So we wanted to provide with you some information that's kind of about what's happening in between. So for these students, and so you can see across the top column of the little white boxes, there are 29 students in this subgroup, kids who took the pretest and interim benchmark 1, who are Black 8th graders. So 13 of them actually showed growth. And can you elaborate on that, just what the growth means?
It was a percentage score. So for example, if a student scored a 15% on the pretest and a 19% on benchmark 1, then they showed growth.
Mhm. So this is helpful when kind of trying to look at all the kids being at 0 in terms of proficiency. What did they grow at all? Was there any change? So we do see that for 13 of them, there was individual progress. 6 of the,
Just to
please.
clarify, to be in the growth or the lost ground, it could even just be 1% or.
Yes. Yeah. And we did this as an initial analysis for ourselves, just to kind of see, because I think ultimately what we could break this down and say, okay, well, what would be, and this might be future conversation, what would be the expected growth? How much growth would a child have to make to get from minimally proficient to partially proficient? Like how many percent or how many more questions would a student need to get right? And we could maybe get a little bit more precise in our monitoring, perhaps in our coaching. So when we get our interim benchmark 2 data back in January, one of the other things that we've changed is our leadership seminar, usually for many years happened later in January, like the 3rd or 4th week. That's a lot of weeks between the time the kids take the interim benchmark and when we have, not that schools don't take action on it, but when we have a time to be systemic with our DataWise process. So this year we've moved it to the 1st week back. So the kids are going to finish their assessment right before they go on winter break. Our team is going to crunch all the data while we're on break. And then as soon as we get back, we'll have the data like fresh. So we're going to bring the leaders all together. We're going to use our DataWise process and evaluate. And for these students in particular, really start to dig into those more subtle changes and determine problems of practice and learning-centered problems based on those more subtle distinctions for 3rd quarter. Because, realistically, we've got from January to early April.
Spring break, so like spring break's in the middle.
So we don't have a lot of time between 2 and when the students sit for AASA. So we have to be really targeted and really precise in these areas.
No, and thank you for bringing that up, because I think I do like having the data laid out this way. I think it is helpful, because if you're just looking at 0 proficiency to 0 proficiency, you never see where things are blossoming and changing. But to build on Miss Gibson McLean, I think the next step for you all would be, let's dive in and see, of those 13 making growth, are they making, 20% growth or whatever those kind of, can we make this up? And then my other,
Especially with those numbers, we're gonna stay on that, like a third of eighth graders that are losing ground or a half of them fifth graders, that's a little concerning on the opposite end. I
yeah.
guess.
And so I think, yeah, with that, being able to monitor how much ground. If they're losing 1%, they're almost in that maintaining, still problematic, obviously. And then my follow-up question to that would be how often are conversations being had with the teachers about those specific students? Because this, could be a teacher has one of these students, right? And so how often is that happening in planning time with coaches, like about that specific student?
Well, I mean, I think it probably depends on each school. Some schools have, grade level meetings or PLCs, or they have their Wednesdays, but I don't think we know exactly how often they're talking with their teachers.
So that's valuable feedback. We could structure or create a frequency for those monitorings, I guess, those check-ins.
Yeah, well, because I'm just thinking, when we have, like, we know the subgroup for this, but often too, you have a student who isn't qualified for things and you're trying to, make up those gaps, and being able to spend explicit time talking about what's one win I can get with this student, this one student, this next 2 weeks, right? And little pieces like that.
Thank you.
I think there was some submitted questions for this, but, go ahead, Dr. Dupin.
I have the questions, so
Okay.
I'll just, if you're ready. What plans are in place to address the observed decrease in classroom curriculum adoption and use, particularly for populations where proficiency gains are critical? So much in the same way that we talked about addressing curriculum use and engagement by students, how are we thinking about that? What are we doing to think about that for these students in particular?
I think it's the same thing that we were talking about, just obviously bringing that awareness to the teachers. I know that some of our schools, the leaders have created data sheets to make sure that we know who the students are and that they're monitoring them. So like you were saying, but I just don't know how often they're doing that. But the same thing, like professional development, understanding how to read the data to be able to address that with the curriculum. And the standards, and then using that data wise process to see what standards our students are not understanding and how we can use the curriculum to support that. We have gotten some new curriculum, which is Freckle, right? And other areas to have students practice at home. But basically it's the same strategies for increasing that curriculum use and pacing.
I know you had read the thing before about, and I am trying to not give advice or go into that, and I don't know how to word things, but I guess what the point I'm trying to get across is, I think that it's going to require, we've already been here, we already know this. It's going to require some level of intentionality, some level of differentiation to really, obviously there's a difference here, right? We've identified Black 8th grade students for a reason, and therefore I think there's going to have to be some intentionality and differentiation in how and what's working and what needs more attention, because I don't know that applying the same things for all 8th graders is necessarily going to be always successful for this cohort of students. And I think that's the core of what this goal is and how to make movement here. And I think that's where I totally see that last bullet point on what is working. And I don't know that that's enough. And I know we've just started, and I'm hoping we can continue work on how we can become more intentional with some more things like the last bullet point that talk about what are we doing with that information rather than just supplying it, or how are we, being intentional or learning new things about how to work with Black students in making sure that they're making growth in math. And so I'm not trying to do this in violation of how we do this progress monitoring, but that's just kind of immediately where my brain went when kind of looking at all this and seeing kind of just the similarities between the two, because they aren't the same goal for that very reason, you know? And so that's just kind of where I'm at.
And I agree with you about the differentiation, because we've been able to do that with literacy and teach how to do small group instruction and how to differentiate for our students. And so we've talked about how do we replicate that in math and have differentiated instruction based on the students' data and what skills they're ready to learn next. And so that's what we're working on as a team, but first starting with all of us getting professional development on how to do that.
Certainly, and I understand that.
And I was going to ask kind of with that, if you can remind me, because I know like the schedules are the same across the schools. Yes?
Yes.
So
With the
is
exception
there,
of in dual language, there are some
Yeah.
variation.
and I know typically in K-5, you can kind of wiggle room a little easier with, having this 30 minutes is your, teach and enrich, reteach and enrich. What does that look like for the schedule wise for the teachers, especially in 8th grade? Do they have, like, is the schedule built out? Is that maybe a infrastructure constraint where even if they knew how to differentiate, do they really have that time built block?
It definitely was an expectation that was set forward as far as building master course schedules for the year. Some schools, due to staffing challenges, like as far as students not coming in their neat little boxes, were unable to incorporate that 30 minutes of reteach time every day. Also in the upper grades, correct me if I'm wrong, there's 30 minutes of reteach or enrich built in middle school, and that would be math or ELA. And I would say a lot of schools have chosen to use that in ELA time. Something else that's really interesting is that of our 8th graders, of our Black 8th grade students, 7 of them are emerging multilinguals, and of our 5th graders, 15 of them, 15 of the 45 are emerging multilinguals. And then, of course, as you heard at one of our last sessions, of the emerging multilinguals in our district, half of them are pre-emergent emergent. So it's definitely a need. One of the ways that we're supporting that is by having our SEI cadre that's working with Heidi Koski and Sarah Beth, and our SEI, our ELL coaches that are working with teachers. As you can imagine, though, our math teachers are not getting that direct professional development on how to engage emerging multilinguals in math instruction. But I can tell you that it's something that teachers are asking for, that coaches are very much aware of, as far as helping them to plan, starting even just with some basic strategies for how do we make math instruction more accessible to our emerging multilingual students.
Oh, and I'm happy to hear that, because I think, there can be opportunities in math for the emerging multilinguals because there's the universality of the numbers. And if we can help with that vocabulary, which is still meeting, their instructional minutes as far as language immersion. So.
And this is another place where we see also an intersection between the guardrails and the goals. So a lot of that awareness for that dig down into noticing that multilingual connection came through a conversation we had with Dr. O from NAU and some of his personal life experience that he shared with us that really kind of opened our eyes to, we don't have a monolithic subgroup of Black students. Like within this very small subgroup, there are subgroups of the subgroup. And so, as we look at things like strategies, you heard the team talk a lot about very individualized differentiation. And ultimately, that's going to be the key, because if we try to create like a blanket type of individualization for this subgroup as if they're all the same, we won't make significant progress doing that. And in some ways, we'll create greater problems than had we not tried to differentiate.
And I wonder too, like, it sounds like it's possible, but are we checking to see, is there greater absenteeism with these students? Is there, have they been suspended? Things like that could contribute. We have a list of who they are, and if we're following them, I assume that we would have access to situational stuff like that.
Yeah, now that we have them identified, it's easier to look at that situational data.
Yeah, this is very helpful feedback. And I think, so some of the things that we can take back are I appreciate the recommendation around, or the conversation around monitoring absenteeism and suspension. That is not something that we're currently doing relative to these students. Not specifically. The intersection between language learning and math, that is not something that we've been giving explicit attention to. So when we're teaching language acquisition strategies, they're typically applied in the language development space. So that makes us start to wonder if we can work on a way to kind of bring that planning together. So when you're learning, whether you're a teacher and you're learning how to teach language, or whether you're a student and you're learning how to apply language acquisition strategies, do we have an explicit way to apply that across ELA and math? Could we somehow facilitate the planning process in a way to bring those together? Those are ideas. What's that?
It's an end science, right?
Right, for sure. Because vocabulary is a huge part of this as well. There's just, so if there's some preloading that we could do with the math vocabulary, that might also help, because that's one of the language acquisition strategies. So this has been invaluable for us to take back and continue to work on, so that we can bring back a more robust progress report for the next round.
Yeah, I was going to share too that Maria and I have been discussing how to replicate a lot of the things we're doing in literacy and in math, and the differentiation can happen during the normal math block. It's just teaching how to do that, because we do that in literacy. They have times where they're working independently and they're working in small groups with a teacher or independently with a teacher. We could do the same thing in math. It's just getting the training and implementing that plan, but also the intense coaching that the literacy team is getting with Heidi Koski, like something similar for our math team.
I appreciate that. Do we have any other questions on this specific Goal 2 progress monitoring report?
Just one other thought. I mean, again, I'm not sure how to 10 years of like recommending. Yeah. We're doing the math in Spanish in our dual language program. So, I mean, maybe, we are already doing that with some students. It's not the same, I know, but, math is a universal, as Lindsay said, universal skill. So, there may be some ahas over there, even talking to those teachers,
I just want to say a thank you to you all, because your jobs at a district level and serving multiple schools is typically to look more macro at the data, and to be this intentional and spend this much time with individual teachers on individual students. I know that takes a lot of hard work and effort. So and working on data over the break. So I just also want to appreciate all of you.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions? All right. With that being said, I will move the governing board adopt the Creighton SOG Goal 2 Progress Monitoring Report 2.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you so much. That moves us along to Progress Monitoring Report for Guardrail 1.
So at this time, I'm going to invite Mr. Carvajal to come forward. This is exciting because this is our first guardrail progress monitor. Mr. Carvajal and the entire team at our Family Resource Center and our Community Education Center play a big role in helping us to keep this guardrail. So he's going to add some insight and help with responses to some questions that were provided. So we have 4 guardrails. Tonight's conversation is about guardrail 1, which is that the superintendent will not neglect student social emotional health, wellness, and development. So for this guardrail, the board established 2 interim measures. The first is that the percent of students in grades 6 through 8 who respond favorably to indicators of self-management on the Panorama survey will increase from 62% in May of 2024 to 66% in May of 2025. The second interim measure is that the percent of persons utilizing the Creighton Family Resource Center who respond favorably to indicators of customer satisfaction on the Listen for Good survey will increase from 0% in May of 2024 to 25% by May 2025. So we've introduced 2 additional data sets. The Panorama survey is a tool that we have been using for about 4 years in the district. We began to use it when we were part of Project Elevate. And so we do have years of comparative data. Although when we first started with Panorama, we were under an agreement with the Arizona Department of Education under the prior superintendent of public instruction. And then when the administration changed, the relationship with Panorama ended. So we had to transition it to our own management. So we only have access to our couple years of data from when the agreement has been between the district and Panorama directly. And then Listen for Good is new to us this year. Can you give us just a tiny little bit about what Listen for Good is? And
Absolutely, Madam President, members of the board, executive team, thank you. It's my pleasure to be able to share some information about you. We're super excited. All of the family resource centers across the Arizona state are working with Listening for Good. This is a company that specializes in surveys to find out the high quality of customer services that all of the resource centers are providing to the families, and also what gap in services are in between. And so the surveys are specifically designed to gather that information about services, what we're doing right, what's something that we can improve, and what was ultimately the impact that the family and the child are obtaining through those services, resources, and support.
so one of the things that we learned about the Listen for Good survey, this comes to us through the First Things First grant, which provides essential funding to the Family Resource Center for its operations. So we didn't initially go about selecting it. However, we've been researching it, and what we've learned is really exciting because it deeply aligns across our guardrails. And I just wanted to share several of the key principles that guide the Listen for Good survey as a tool. One of those is that they have this concept of a feedback loop. So we ask for feedback and receive the voice, and then take that information back to inform the community of participants, and then keep that relationship ongoing. So to be high quality, a feedback loop has to be in service of equity. It is an equity-centric tool designed to elevate voice and share power. And that is highly aligned to our district's mission. It is highly aligned to the work of the Family Resource Center, and it is highly aligned to the intention of this and the other guardrails. So it's, the more we learn about it, the more we like it, and it's still in its kind of infancy for us, but we are optimistic about the value that we will be able to gain from the information provided, but also the relationships that we anticipate being able to build with our community. So I'm going to switch back to the Panorama survey. What I'm sharing with you is the responses by our student subgroups. So these are screenshots of the actual reports that we have in our Panorama dashboard. So I was unable to manipulate them too much in terms of how they're presented, but I wanted to highlight some of the acronyms that are used in there because they label things a little bit differently than we might typically talk. So the first grid shows our student ELL status. These are our emerging multilingual students in grades 6 through 8th. Yes, the yes bar is more like the percentage of students giving a positive or favorable response. No would be the percentage of students giving a no response. So we can see a difference in most cases between how the general population of students in 6th through 8th grade is responding versus a very specific subgroup. So the English language learner, the emerging multilingual students, overall positive responses are a bit lower than the population as a whole. Free and reduced price lunch, those are students who are qualified for participation in, it's a poverty indicator. We can see the breakdown with our students who are receiving free or qualifying for reduced price lunches, having slightly lower indicators of positive responses on these questions. Students with special education status, also a little bit lower positive response. So it was interesting to look at this breakdown by these groups to kind of see, interestingly, our male students expressed a slightly less positive set of responses. They're all kind of generally higher than 50%, but there is a difference within these subgroups. This is just the breakdown of participation in grades 6, 7, and 8. So the majority of the respondents were 8th graders on this survey. And then the majority of respondents across race, or this is just the breakdown of all the students who responded. How did they self-identify in terms of their race?
Oh, okay.
So of all the kids, of all the 266 students who took the survey, 68% of them identified as Black or African American, and so forth.
So wait, so it's not showing that students of different races had fewer
points. No, it's saying that 90% of the 266 students who did the survey liked, which is
I'm sorry.
No.
I am
Is that
no,
what
no,
you're
no, no,
saying?
no.
I was
I'm
like,
wrong.
that doesn't align with
Yeah.
our like actual student population.
Math. No. I'm sorry. The percentage of favorable responses.
Okay.
favorable responses. Okay, I was like, how does this work?
Sometimes I get lost in all the bar graphs.
Okay.
A
But,
lot of data.
my apologies. Those are percent favorable, percent of students responding favorably overall
By subgroup.
by subgroup. Correct.
Okay, that's what.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions.
I'm like, you had me 5 of the 6 graphs and
Till I-
then just
well,
lost.
that's-
It was that numbers meme in front of your face.
Well, do you ever have that where you look at something so many times you can't see it anymore? So
Yeah.
that's my relationship with these images. So overall, 69% of the students in grades 6 through 8 that responded favorably to indicators of self-management, 69% of the students responded favorably. So that is actually higher than it has ever been.
I don't know if we addressed
on the
this,
whole.
but what are the indicators of self-management?
I can provide that to you. I can
Okay.
give you the questions. I intended to have that here, but I
Oh,
can
it's
put that in
fine.
a board update. It's a very valuable question.
And I only asked that because obviously looking at the racial breakdown, it made me wonder how much those indicators are rooted in whiteness, and that's why 90% of them are giving favorable responses. That's my curiosity there.
Well, and I have another question too about like the language and the vocabulary used in them.
Mhm.
So if there's students that are, an 8th grader, but they're at a 5th grade reading level, if they're emerging multilingual, is that affecting how they can access the survey?
Yeah, I just want to speak to that real quick. I would say that that's one of the things about Panorama that isn't working so well. It is a complicated assessment survey.
Oh, okay.
The vocabulary is pretty high. It has a lot of questions on it. So I think that that actually might be contributing to the response rate, which was one of the board questions, is what can we do to get the response rate up? As you can see, this is based on 277 students who took the assessment in October. We are required to get parental consent before we can give this survey to our students. So I actually haven't looked at the breakdown between how many parents said, sure, let my student take this survey
okay.
versus how many actually did it. But I do know that one of the things that is challenging about Panorama is the complexity of the language and the length of the survey, which could contribute to rate of response.
And given what you just said there also, what is kind of generally the format of the answers? Is it multiple choice? Is it a free form? or-
Likert scale?
It's both. It's primarily Likert scale, multiple choice responses. It also has spaces for free response to open-ended questions.
And sometimes those Likert scales, depending on the vocabulary, can then be very confusing in deciding, well, which end of this means this and which end of this means that. Kind of like those job interview questions in the applications or the attitudinal assessments that people get. And they're like, is there a wrong answer?
I think it's important to think about because it's difficult to measure these things, right? You're always going to have an error, a margin of error because it's self-reporting from middle schoolers who are trying to figure out how to articulate their own abilities and feelings and efficacy. But I think it's definitely worth looking into, is this the right tool if
If
the
it's that-
vocabulary and things like that are making it so difficult to even understand.
Yeah, if
'Cause,
I
yeah,
was
adults
12 and I
struggle
got
with
to
which
that,
side is
like, let me just
strongly
get done with this
disagree.
now.
And that's the beautiful thing about, these progress monitors report, that we haven't really had anything like this. It's the first time. But as we keep going in time, if we see that this is not really being effective, if by the next round we still have the same amount of kids, obviously we have more than 4,500 student enrollment. So that's not even and that's why I kind of asked that question, is how is the district addressing the parent opt-out rates? Because as a parent myself, I didn't really get any like education on what this was or how it was happening, how I can talk to my anybody else. I'm on all the newsletters. I didn't really see it going out. So what is specifically is the district addressing to make sure that parents are aware of, like, hey, these are conversations you can be having with your kids, or this is what this is meant for?
That's definitely an input that I think we need to strengthen, is the communication component about the survey to students, even to the teachers, and then ultimately to our parents and families. And so Mr. Carvajal is prepared to talk a bit about how we're seeking to address all of our surveys, because as we mentioned, and there's a question about survey fatigue. So one of the other questions is, what processes are in place to mitigate the effect of survey fatigue while ensuring critical data collection? So, this is a long survey. Listen for Good, we're looking at specific questions. Panorama, we're looking at specific questions, but the survey encompasses quite a number of things. So do you want to just dive into?
Before you jump into that, if I could just, something that I think is important from an important perspective for us to have as we work with the data too, is the survey itself may not be perfect, and we may be able to find alternate tool sets, that can improve over time. Or we may be able to improve the way we interact with the existing survey. Regardless of that, I think one of the things that was important to us as a team, we felt was important to the board, was to find a tool set, right? So this is the tool set we had. And I'm not saying this as an excuse or anything, but one of the things that I've come to learn is often within student outcomes focused governance, people will say, well, we can't really do anything with this right now because we don't have a tool set to use, right? So we're trying to find the best tool set that we have. I'm saying that as a frame because the other thing that's important to know is we are measuring over time. So whatever problems pre-exist within the survey, the comparative to prior years, those problems still existed. So as a measure for measure, it still gives us some amount of valid data because it provides us with a comparative based on the system having the same problems within it at each point of measure. Now, that's not me saying, oh, let's not find a way to do better. Absolutely, let's find a way to do better.
Yeah.
But I just don't want us to throw out the results, based on, oh, but it's only 272, or, oh, there was all these barriers, or the language is difficult. We're still, the language was the same language in spring of 23-24 as it will be in spring of 24-25. So there still is a comparative there, that we can draw out of that. So sorry.
You were going to say the baby with the bathwater.
I avoided it. I completely dodged it. So, but I almost went there. And with that, I'll turn over to
Thank you. And that's a good segue, because everyone likes to receive support and resources until they ask to give feedback, whether it's in a survey or verbally. That's like, I don't have time, I'm leaving, I got what I needed, and off they go. And so the first thing that we need to do to ensure that the community understands is to provide a staff member that is going to be the link with that person, with that student. In that case, it's a staff member or a teacher. For the families, is our outreach specialist, our family resource center, and a community ed adult learning center. Through those venues, we have those conversations and we are able to explain to parents, this is why it's important. You may think that your voice doesn't matter, but it does matter. Let's empower you. You have a brain in your head, and we want to hear what you're thinking, if we're meeting the goal, and how we're best supporting you. When we ask those questions, people are okay until they're about 3 to 5 questions. None of these surveys are 3 to 5 questions. They're 15, 20, or over.
Absolutely not.
Yes. And then once you think you're done through all of the survey questions, the content, and the areas that we want to collect the data to report back and improve our practices, then we hit them with the extra, which is the demographics. And please, it's a touchy feeling, but I need you to identify yourself in the next 5, 7 questions. And so the first thing that we need to do as a team to ensure that the community understands is to be transparent. And the best way to be transparent is this is the purpose of the survey. And your answers are anonymous. And this is how your feedback is going to help us improve. Another thing that we can do is to streamline the surveys. And by streamline the surveys, I mean, let's minimize the number of questions. If they're similar, can we combine them? So instead of 12 questions, can I have 8? And I can get the same data. We also don't rely only on the questions that we want, but we have Hanover Research. We have First Thing First, Listening for Good, and other people who this is what they do for work. And so they let us know which items will give us the answers or the information that we really need. And so they help us with the design of the survey. What will be more practical, whether there's going to be a scale, whether there's going to be a multiple choice, or whether there's going to be an emoji for specific students or specific language. So that makes the survey more attractive and less intimidated. If it feels like a test, I won't take the survey. But if it's more friendly, then I'll be more willing to give you my feedback. In addition to that, the next step that we can do is to incentivize people to take the surveys. How do we do that? Here's a coupon for the next time you come to this class. You're going to be entered into a raffle. And we're not coercing the results. We're not trying, if you give us a good survey results, we're going to give you this. It's just a way to incentivize people. We know that motivation leaps better. Discipline is a little bit more precise, but motivations, we need to answer all of these questions.
I don't know if the latter is something we can delve into.
Right. That will be one thing to steal. And then the last thing that we do for our surveys is we try to time them right. What will be the best time? Is it weekends? Is it during parent conferences? Is it at a carnival event? What will be the best time for parents or students to give us their responses? And of course, knowing that in our district, they're spoken over 27 different languages, we offer not just in English and Spanish, but with other languages. So everybody's counted and everybody has an opportunity to provide the feedback. So in a nutshell, that's how we try to mitigate the survey result and how our process to collect data goes into any survey, not just a specific department or school.
Did you say that there is the ability to customize on either of them, Panorama or the Listen for Good?
Yes.
Yes. So we have the ability within Panorama, and one of the things we'll have to study is if we do customize, how does it affect the relatability of results? So that's not to say you want to keep giving a survey that may be too much or misaligned, but if we just gave, for example, the indicators of students, I'm batting 1,000.
Self-management.
Self-management, thank
Yeah.
you.
It's okay.
Then, but by the time they get to those questions, are they influenced
Are they
by the
tired
questions
and
they've already
fatigued
taken? So if
and-
you break those out, but there are ways to customize in both tool sets.
And we have actually, we've diagnostically customized it in the past where, like, if we saw troubling results, we've sometimes, I don't think we've done it with student data, but with staff data, we've sometimes gone back and after there's been some sort of effort to improve situations, taken a subset of questions and delivered them to staff in order to be able to determine, did we make an impact on this or not? So there, I don't know if it works the same way with the students or.
I don't know. That's a good question. What I do know, and this is why part of why we have to get parental consent for Panorama, is we actually can see how each child responds. So if you get And I don't know that everybody can see that, but like I can log in and look and see the results of individuals. And so if you get, students who are flagging really low or like are really showing that like you can know who they are and plan for individual follow-up. So that's one of the things that we like about Panorama is it gives it that experience. And so we're hopeful that as we are successful in selecting our academic director for student support and restorative practices, that this will be a data set that actually could inform our MTSS process. There's a lot to work out with the details of that, but that is a piece that could be very valuable about this survey tool. So we could potentially go back and either through survey or through personal follow-up, get more detail about a student's responses. So just a few things about what is working and related to the guardrail holistically, which speaks to the superintendent not neglecting social emotional development. Surveys are a measurement, but there's other pieces that go into what shapes the responses that our students are providing. So all of our schools will have a ruler implementation team and all members will complete 6 hours of initial orientation training by May 2025. 3 of 4 of our teaching and learning coaches for student support have been hired. The academic director for student support and inclusive practices position has been created and is posted.
Thank you.
And
Yes.
and the Listen for Good survey has been fully developed and is now live for family use. The items that need more attention, frankly speaking, Harmony and ruler implementation have been delayed due to unanticipated staff vacancies and the fact that we had to reorganize around those teams, those vacancies. So I've been going through the training. Ms. Wazalik's been going training. That wasn't part of our initial plan, but I've been learning a lot about ruler, as has Ms. Wazalik. Eve Carroll from our Effective Schools team is going through the training now, and that wasn't part of the plan. But all to say, there has been a delay in implementation, and we're working to catch up.
And we have a team going tomorrow to tour a third-year implementation at a neighboring district, correct?
Yeah, we have 17 staff going tomorrow.
With ruler or Harmony?
With ruler.
Okay.
Ruler. One of our teaching and learning coach for student support position remains vacant. So we've hired the 3 out of the 4. We have been unable so far to fill the 4th. We've done some interviews and it remains vacant. The role of the teaching and learning coach for student support is unclear and requires focus. They've done some good stuff, but it's a new role. It's kind of like the shifting from the child justice advocacy role that we phased out into this new role. And what is it supposed to do? Are they in charge of ruler? Are they not? How do they support Southwest Behavioral Health? How they integrate with Care Solace? These are all questions that Dr. Pombo and team have worked really hard to try to bring into efficacy. And so the decision was, let's work with new teachers and support their integration into the district with best practices related to student classroom management. That's very much a need, but the intent here is to really build the capacity working with kids and working with our staff to support the social emotional needs of our students. And we've talked about the survey structure requiring parent consent. Some parents do exercise their right to opt out. We believe that with more information, more time, this year we are only doing 1 round. We did 1 round at the beginning of, hey, we're given a survey. Here's how you give consent for that. We could do another round supported by additional outreach and opportunities to learn. And we still are very much in the beginning phases of Listen for Good. And though we believe it's a great survey, we're going to have a lot of learning to do as we start to get data back.
Thank you for that. Oh, go ahead, Mr. Mann.
I think in this case, we may have hit the 2 questions.
I believe
Middle.
so, yes.
So,
yeah.
Do we have any other questions or comment on this? Thank you so much for all the hard work. Thank you. Seeing no further questions or comments, I move the governing board approve Creighton SOFG Guardrail 1 Progress Monitoring Report 1.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you so much. And that concludes our student outcomes focused governance conversation. We are moving over to public comments. Ms. Juarez, no public comments? Thank you. Moving over to 6, which is approval of consent. I move the governing board approve consent agenda items A through O in accordance with policy BEDB-E. All those in favor?
Aye.
And congratulations to our new hire. I'm excited to meet them and see where the district moves forward with their added on assistance. That brings us to 7A, which is Exceptional Student Services Department update.
So I'm privileged to introduce Ms. Gretchen Kaiser, our Director of Exceptional Student Services. I can't believe it's been just now a year, right? So,
You
yeah.
didn't get here yesterday.
She and the team have been working tirelessly to support the work of the department, but also provide evaluation and honest reflection about progress made and progress yet to come. So at this time, I'll turn it over to you, and we of course stand ready to respond to questions throughout and at the end of the presentation, of course.
Thank you.
This is that time in the presentation where you need the Jeopardy music to kind of fade.
Thank you for your patience.
While you figure that out, does it feel like it's simultaneously been a month and 10 years that you've been here?
Yeah.
Holding on, some backup help.
If it's helpful, we can use.
Thank you. It typically works. So
It's
thank
already
you for
warmed
your
up.
patience.
We even tested.
We even tested it. So thank you for your patience.
Oh,
That's why it's not Ricky. They tested.
Yeah. We're too prepared.
Say.
Thank you, Russell.
See a year.
You're right. You have that up and going. No call for backup.
No panic dies.
Just been. That interesting.
Probably a restart, right?
Do you want to use
Fixes
mine?
everything. Or do
Yeah, we can.
switch it over.
Okay. Either one, Dr. Dupin.
I'm gonna bring my computer
Okay.
to you. And
Thank you for your patience. I apologize for the
Oh,
delay.
no.
Thank you, Dr. Dupin.
It's late. The technology's tired.
Thank you all for your patience on that. Madam President, governing board members, Superintendent Mann, leadership, thank you, Dr. Dupin. Thank you for the opportunity to stand here today to talk about one of my most favorite topics, our kids and what we do, and to really celebrate and look at the work of the Exceptional Student Services Department. Perfect. Thank you, sir, on the side. Thank you for that. In the spirit of our student outcomes focused governance, what we expect of our colleagues, we model and expect of ourselves. So I'd like to highlight today our learning targets and success criteria of our time together today. We will understand how the Exceptional Student Services Department serves the Creighton families, students, and staff, the common themes of celebration and action items for continuing department and programmatic improvement, and our success criteria. How will we know? While learning about this update, we will identify the responsibilities of the department, describe the celebrations and ongoing needs, and summarize the recommendations to support actions and next steps. I would like to formally introduce you to the team, our leadership team of the Exceptional Students Department. I'll first highlight the structure, and then I'd like to proudly introduce some of my teammates behind me. On the perimeter of your screen, you will see the members of the Exceptional Student Service Department that are housed at the district office that we then are used to support and deploy to campuses as needed. The director, 2 coordinators, and right now we have 3 teaching and learning coaches. And I'd like just to highlight, as you know, the loss of our teammate Alan this year was one of the vacancies that you see listed there, and that second coordinator has yet to been filled all year. And we currently have one of our teaching and learning coaches on long-term leave. One thing I would like to continue to highlight is our colleagues located in the center circle. These colleagues serve as our leads in departments to really support the work of special education in the Exceptional Services Department. And I would like to highlight that each one of the members you see, our lead psychologists, lead speech and language pathologists, our motor lead and assistive technology carry full jobs during the day, including caseloads of students and service, are part of our preschool child find team, and so are committed to carrying out our initiatives outside the workday. So I'd just like to highlight the commitment they have to our department and to the work of our team. I would like to take a minute just to introduce you. I'm so proud to be members of this team. We have Dorothy Green, one of our instructional coaches. We have Nemis Marsolier, who is our lead of our Universal Design, Assistive Technology, and Accessibility lead, and our lead motor therapist, William Ormsby. You heard a little bit about who we are. The next topic I want to discuss is our why, really what drives us to do the work in which we do with the Exceptional Student Services Department. We do provide services and supports to bring our student outcomes focused governance goals within reach to each and every Creighton learner. When we're looking and talking about the work of decreasing minimal proficiency in math for all 8th graders, increasing math proficiency, increasing English proficiency for emerging multilinguals, for increasing reading proficiency for 3rd graders, our students that do receive specialized support within the Exceptional Students Department are in that subgroup. So we believe, and we work towards the SOFG goals to support student outcomes for all. When we're looking at the Exceptional Student Services Department, sometimes people think that that is just supporting special education, and that is a huge part of what we do, and we're very proud in which to do it. And in Creighton, we service the entire district in many different ways. And so the 2-column highlights the groups in which we serve and the way that that team that I mentioned, that leadership team of our instructional coaches and our leads, who we serve and who we support. The Exceptional Services Department does support all of our students who are visiting the health office. I have the great privilege of supporting our nurses and medical team. We do support our community preschool, which is our students who might not yet be identified or are not identified, our general education preschool students looking to grow our long-term K-8 team within preschool. We also service our students through the Rehabilitation Act, Section 504 plans, who may have a disability and do require accommodations and support in order to access that of their typical peers. We also serve, as I mentioned before, we have 11 nurses and medical staff in which we support, and we have the great privilege of walking alongside our hardworking leaders, our principals and assistant principals at the elementary schools. When we're looking at the profile of the support in which that we serve, really believe in that servant leadership within Exceptional Student Services. As of the 70th day numbers, we are currently supporting 674 students identified with special needs who are currently on an individual education plan. That's just under 14%. And in looking at the data from last year, we were hovering right around 12. So that is an increase in our students in which we are serving in the special education realm. We right now identify and support 48 developmental preschool students. Those are our students and our families that are coming in at the age of 3 through 5, looking for that early intervention supports and services. And we are proud to be supporting our developmental preschool students and families as well. Part of the work in which we do also support within special education is we support our private day schools and our homeschool families that reside or live or in the boundaries of our Creighton Elementary School District. And currently that does include the entire child find process, as well as developing and customizing individualized service plans, which is a little bit different than an IEP in the public setting, but we are also currently serving 27 of our students who are parentally privately placed or our homeschool families. We have the great honor of supporting and walking alongside our special education teachers, our educational professionals, our psychologists, our speech and language pathologists, our occupational therapists, our physical therapists, and our assistive technology specialist. We are so proud to serve and support our teams that are doing the right thing for our kids and our campuses. This snapshot is a highlight of just recognizing and identifying the different areas in which the Exceptional Student Services supports. And the yellow, the shades of yellow, are that general education, that support of all students. There are health services, 504 preschool. We also collaborate directly with our Head Starts team in providing direct services in some of our related areas for our Head Start families. We support our students who are on home instruction, our general education students who do require that type of instruction. And we also support, as I mentioned before, that universal design, our assistive technology and loan library. And highlighting some of that special education, our teams do support all of the child find evaluation, that federal law of making sure that we are identifying and supporting our students with special needs. We support, and I'll talk a little bit about in a minute, our special education programs. We'll talk about the continuum of services in which we provide our developmental preschools. Our team within the Exceptional Students Department also supports our alternative assessments. So those students who are eligible into a modified assessment and that don't take the AASA. We also provide our homebound instruction, those students who are not yet able or not quite ready or able to attend a full day of in-person school or in school at all. We support our home instruction. Our team also looks at the Medicaid and runs all the Medicaid supports. And again, the privately placed. We are a busy and exciting department. And we're really, as I mentioned before, it really does come together to support the whole team and the whole child, looking at both that general education side and that special education side. As I mentioned before in the slide, we are proud, Creighton is proud, our department is proud to provide a continuum of services. So not one size fits all for our students who are identified with special needs. So we do provide a continuum of services. And if I may frame for just a moment, please, one thing you'll notice in the next two slides is that each of our program descriptions starts with a cross-categorical program. Federal law does require for students to be eligible and receive specialized services, they must meet metrics or criteria under a category. We very much believe, Creighton believes, our team believes that a student's eligibility criteria is not the story. It does not define them. And sometimes that can be, oh, well, they're cross-categorical. It is part of the story, but we customize supports. The program does not fit the student. The student doesn't fit the program. We make sure that we build the IEP to meet their needs. And in offering that continuum of services, I'd like to highlight some of those programs in which we do provide those customized supports and those methodologies that differ. So we're able to meet the unique needs of our learners. One program that many people are familiar with is known as that resource program. That's looking at that cross-categorical program, offering a blend of instruction to support students in the academic, social, emotional, whatever those needs may be. The students, oftentimes their disability is not yet impacting enough where they're unable to access the typical or general education setting. So that continuum of services could be pushed into the general education classroom. It could provide some customized pull-out support. The majority of our students do fall under that category for our resource programming, and that type of support is offered at every single school to meet the needs of the students. When we're looking at our regional programs, I'll go through a couple acronyms and talk a little bit about the programs and where they're located, as those are regional programs in which we support. Our Students Taking Responsibility for Success is our STAR program that is located at Loma Linda School. That cross-categorical program supports students who may struggle with social and emotional regulation to a degree, again, that interferes with their ability to be in the general education classroom throughout the day. It's a customized regional program that we provide different methodologies and curriculum supports in which to support students who might have those needs at Loma Linda. Our structured teaching, reinforcement, and individual environment, our STRIVE program, is located at two campuses at Excelencia and Papago. We're looking at that cross-categorical program, providing those supports, both academic and adaptive, supporting students with those developmental disabilities that significantly affects their verbal and nonverbal communication and those social interactions. Again, that in a way that adversely impacts their performance in the typical education setting. Reaching Independence Through Supports and Education, our RISE program, is proudly located at Mackin. Again, a cross-categorical program that looks at academic and social for students functioning below their peers in intellectual ability. Our Practical Academics and Community Education is also cross-categorical categorical program for students who do function significantly below that their peers. Again, that adversely affects their ability to access learning in the general education or typical setting. And one of our regional programs that's at the new Larry C. Kennedy is our Providing Learning and Community Essential Skills Are Places, which is looking at, again, those cognitive and self-help adaptive needs for students who are functioning significantly below their typical peers. It also customized supports in our students who might have medical needs that require consistent supervision or support in order for them to access their free and appropriate public education that's located at Larry C. Kennedy.
Was that the one that was on the list before?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. Yes, thank you. Heard a little bit about who and why and what drives us and who we are, and I'd like to spend the rest of the time really leaning into the program's review, our focus of the work in which that I've had the great privilege of supporting since my tenure started about a year ago here in Creighton. The intentional work when I first began was to really understand and listen to what is the current reality, to hear and understand the celebrations, to talk through and have candor with our colleagues, to have those rough conversations, to say, not only where are we, what are those celebrations, what strengths can we build on, but what's that honest conversation of where do we need to go? What are those blue skies? I want to start by saying, the amount of time that my colleagues gave me for one-on-one conversations, for attending site meetings at every single site, for visiting with our cohorts, or there's just a list of the amount of people that offered their heart, their candor, and their honesty to help provide a picture, again, of those successes and also where we really need to go based on their experiences and based on their expertise and disciplines in all different roles, both special education and general education around the district. And I'll tell you, it was so cool to start in Creighton and hear the brags, to hear the cool celebrations. I didn't really know a lot of people yet. So I said, I got to meet that one, or I'd love to pop in that classroom. But the celebrations were great. And I know the list might look small, but I want to still and celebrate and highlight the conversations that on the previous list through those interviews, those surveys, those one-on-one conversations. There was so much celebration around the dedication of our teachers. Our teachers are coming in every day to work very, very hard for our students. And that is, I'm like, I'm walking into someplace really awesome. So really wanted to highlight the work of our teachers. Additionally, thinking of the boots on the ground, our committed paraprofessionals, which really oftentimes serve as the glue to some of our regional programs and provide those accommodations and additional supports for our students throughout the day. Many of our teams identified strong collaboration with maybe their school site, with their grade level collaboration, with their department team, that open conversation, that productivity, those conversations. Many of our schools highlighted some of those strong collaborative relationships and partners within their school team or department. Some of our campuses were highlighting their established inclusionary practices, right? That collaboration with our special education and our general education teachers. What does that look like in supporting our students with special needs in their least restrictive environment? So hearing some of those campuses talk about those inclusionary practices was a great celebration to identify. Our site liaisons is a term that we use pretty much interchangeably within the ESS department of our instructional coaches or our teachers on assignment. As I mentioned before, the department team, as well as our leads, as I had mentioned, oftentimes are deployed to sites to provide coaching, to provide guidance, to look at unique situations and be a thought partner and critical thinker for our school teams. Also, they're called out when things get tricky. And there's the interpretation of what does this look like from the legal perspective and how do we write by students and making sure that we're honoring all of those layers. So a huge opportunity to brag on our instructional coaches, our site liaison from our school teams that say thank you for coming out and their support. And I echo that. I came in to Creighton and the celebrations really looked at the compliance. We had recently completed our compliance report and audit with our Department of Education, and some of the schools really had highlighted their practices and what they're looking at for compliance and making sure that our IEPs are comprehensive and meet the compliance regulations per Department of Education. So a lot of great celebrations. I do want to lean into and identify with that program's review, the candor, the heart, the honesty, and the trust given to me in those interviews to really highlight some of those deficiencies that were identified in that program's review that went from November to February. in categorizing them through big picture, there was a strong trend and really leaning into the feeling that relationships between the department and the schools were not strong. Whether that was, I'm not sure who to speak to, or sometimes when I approach someone, it may not always feel like it's super approachable. So it might not feel as if I can come and ask a question that I might need help with. Also looking at who supports me with that. And if I'm looking for that unique thing, who is that in the department? So those relationships and the ability to access them well was identified as one of the deficiencies in the program's review.
May I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
When this feedback was given, is this coming more of a teacher to an administrative role and not feeling supported by their administrators, or was it peer-to-peer? What do you mean by lack of strong relationships between department and schools?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. If I may go back a slide to kind of highlight the stakeholder group. So I think that's a great question. I think from the principal's perspective, I can honestly say from that perspective, that trend was we want to lean into the department for help in certain areas. We're not quite sure who to lean into, or we don't always feel as if we get a timely response back in which to support. In looking at our special education teachers, a lot of them are asking for, we want support and we want to build that relationship with you, but you're not spending enough time out there to really establish those relationships. So we're asking that our department, for building those relationships, to spend more time on our campus. So I think there was a common theme, Madam President, in each of the perspectives that, again, was resonated enough for me to identify. It's not everywhere, but it's threaded enough through each of those stakeholder groups to say we have some action to do in that area. Madam President, did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Some feedback we received is I labeled it as no standardized structures for meeting practices, that special education meetings run long, that sometimes they feel unorganized, that our colleagues are maybe not all the time coming prepared, that we're not providing a structure in which families can meaningfully participate in IEP meetings and in MET meetings. So identifying that as the standardized structures for meetings as a topic identified as a need. Very limited curricular resources for specially designed instruction. And that's what's really unique about special education, is not that it's the same as general education, just repeat a couple more times. Specially designed instruction has a definition in by law. It is adaptive. It is looking at the content. It is restructuring how we teach. So it is a highly needed skill. And when we're looking at our student outcomes and we're seeing the lagging student outcomes and we're seeing the need to bridge that gap with the special education process, with those instructional practices and with the curricular resources, both of those were aligned as a need. Our teachers are eager and willing, and many of them know a lot of great things, but how do we keep elevating what they have in their classroom so they can really tailor and customize what they need to provide specially designed instruction per their IEP needs?
When you say, I guess in terms of the very limited, is that at like the district level, or is it, there's not a connect, I guess at a greater level in general across this country, is there curriculum? Is there? And so then in turn, I guess is my question, if that makes sense.
In response to the data gathered through this survey, our teams, again, teacher level, administration level, identified that we in Creighton have a lot of different resources, and some people have access to resources that can better be adaptive for specially designed instruction. So this board member, Gibson McLean, is specific to the resources available for our teams within the Creighton School. Thank you for that question, and please stop me at any point. Thank you for that. Additional deficiencies identified, as I talked a little bit about those relationship examples labeled in the first, was the varied perceptions of roles and responsibilities. Again, I'm needing help, and sometimes it's urgent, sometimes it might wait till next week, but who am I going to and how do I get the help I need, especially in a timely manner in which I feel as if I then can take that information and support in what I need. What was also identified is inadequate departmental structures and systems. And that is huge when we're looking at doing really, really hard work. And when we're looking at the needs of our special education students and families, much of that requires unique decisions within the framework of a system that makes sense and in a system in which our teams can talk, critically think, brainstorm, and make those decisions within that system. So that was an identified need as well. And one of the additional deficiencies identified was those inconsistent use of multi-tiered systems of support. And that is part of the Exceptional Student Services Department. We are collectively part of that tiered system, Tier 1, Tier 2, and 3. In identifying and looking at those areas of deficiencies, then our team really looked critically and identified those top priorities for improvement and identified them in the following categories. First and foremost, starting with us. What does that department culture look like? And how is that an area that we can grow in those relationships? How do we provide efficient customer service? We are servant leaders. That is what we do. Our goal and our job is to serve our students, to serve our teachers, and to serve our schools. Providing, as I mentioned, appropriate resources for specially designed instruction. As I mentioned before, also implementing those effective instructional practices. A big part of that is, and how are we equipping our teams in which to do it? How are we intentionally providing structures and professional development so that our teams, we can be responsive to what our teams need, as well as provide that ongoing professional development, as we know that's what research supports. It's not the one time, it's that ongoing relevant professional development. And also looking at engaging and empowering our families in this process as well. Those are those top priorities. In looking at priority 1, that department culture, as I mentioned before, our team said, how can we lead? What does that mean for us? So some accomplishments to date, and I'll highlight our created commitments and core values on the next page. I'll first review some of those accomplishments to date, please. Again, created those commitments and core values. As we talked about relationships, who do I go to? What does that look like in moving forward? How does my voice get heard? How do I understand how decisions are made? So I understand that process a little bit more. We initiated the Special Education Task Force beginning of last year, and that task force is a committee that we meet regularly, and it is open to any of our members, certificated, classified, administrative. So we are excited to continue that, and that was initiated as an accomplishment thus far, and it is continuing into year 2 now. Increased engagement with staff through our professional learning communities and special education team meetings. In order to build relationships, we need to be out. We need to be walking alongside. We need to be learning. We need to be understanding. So that was a big goal, and that was a commitment that we made within our team to reprioritize our work, to see how do we lessen some of the work that's taking us away from the priorities of our students and teachers in the classrooms. And that's also part of that, evaluating those roles and responsibilities. How are we in line with our SOFG, focusing our efforts and our time on the outcomes for our students? With those identified accomplishments, I'm very much leaning in also to those areas of ongoing needs. Due to some of our vacancies and some of the challenges in which we are facing, that is an area that I still identify as ongoing. I stand here very humbly saying the commitment is there, the intentionality is still there, and it is an area for us to be looking at moving forward and continuing to be present on our campuses, to build those relationships and to walk alongside our teams at the campuses. And that's also looking at increased visibility and communication. When we're looking at building those relationships, when we're looking at building the decisions in which we make, building those guidance documents, helping those systems, how are we layering in communication well, so that way it's responsive and meets the needs, and in a way that our teams can hear it and receive it. Absolutely an ongoing need that we are addressing and continuing to look at.
I have a question. How much of your time do you believe is spent on case management versus actual, in classroom? I mean, does that take away time from other things that you could be focusing on, or is it pretty even? What does that look like?
Madam President, are you asking that of my role right now, current? Or are you asking for the
department in a whole?
That really is our charge, is when we're looking at restructuring our instructional coaches to mirror the work and the cycle and the coaching cycle of our curriculum instruction and assessment team. That really is the #1 priority. So I would like to say, and I think now I don't know if I'm able to provide that because we haven't been able to be out in rooms as much as we are currently operating a department of 3. But that when we're looking at that target goal and mirroring what that is, we're looking to have that be at least 50 to 80% of our time, and that's our target goal. Unfortunately, right now, we're unable to meet that need, but that is constantly the conversation within our instructional team on how we prioritizing time on campus in the classrooms, walking alongside our teams.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that question, Madam President. Evaluate the roles of responsibility and the ongoing needs that is absolutely a place that we need to go. And when we think about our student outcomes and we think about research supporting that the most important person in a student's life is our teacher, if we want to see movement within our students, we need to be there to support our teachers. As I mentioned before, the first thing we did as a department is really looked in within. This is our brainstorming session as a leadership team, and I include this as not only our department team, our instructional coaches, and at that point, our coordinator, but also our leads. So our motor, our assistive technology, our school psychology leads. We really are brainstorming about what is it that we prioritize? Who are we? What does it look like? Who do we want to commit to be? Really looking at students first, building that trust, that integrity, that reliability, the advocating that we believe that we look at long-term trajectory of having our students ready for college, career, community, that access and that education needs to be a high option to provide opportunities for our families and students. Looking at those relationship building as well as solutions. I channel Alan Blankstein, failure is not an option. Our kids need it now. So how are we focusing on those solutions and next steps? Converting those priorities in the we believe statements. What are we anchoring our practices in? What are we anchoring our behaviors in? We believe decisions to be made with the best interests of students. Working together. We believe in the power and the promise of education. We believe in leading by example. We believe in building strong relationships, and we believe in being flexible, creative thinking, and problem solving that is focused on solutions. So highlighting the work in which the team identified collectively as who we are, who we want to be known by, and how do we keep holding ourselves accountable and each other accountable to our commitments and core values. Highlighting priority 2, efficient customer service. As we mentioned, those first 2 priorities, we're really looking within, and really looking within for me as a new member to the team and knowing that there is strong work happening already around the district. Who did I want to be joining in a team? Who do I want to be as a leader? Who do I want to be as a team member? Part of what we looked at, that efficient customer service, very much believe in servant leadership. That is the role and the commitment that we have, being in the privileged spots at the district office in the ESS department. Again, creating that special education task force to support transparency, to support input, to get that voice and talk through that system with any of those members that are willing to be part of that brainstorming opportunity to solve problems and to work through things that might be barriers within our system right now. Increased instructional coaching, that is a high priority for us. And not just instructional coaching of spending time in the room, but even working with our team recently and in that true coaching cycle of spending time with that teacher, getting to know what that need is, including an observation, potentially modeling, inviting a debrief, and coming back in a couple of days to follow up. I'm excited to highlight that later in what we're doing with our corrective reading and reading mastery with our team with McGraw-Hill. But that is still a great need that we recognize. And it's also, as you will see, on our leaning into the deficiency areas as well. In joining collaboratively with our charge for a unified front for our SOFG framework, joining our educational leadership team, joining our curriculum instruction and assessment team, and joining those learning walks. So we are out there, we are seeing, we are walking it, we are supporting, we know how to respond in a timely way that is directly linked to those targets in SOFG. Looking at the standardized systems within the department, again, what does that look like? How can people operate freely and well and make those decisions within the framework of an understood system? Allows for building capacity and allows for that agency of our teams to build those decision-making on their campus. And lastly, establish the use of agendas within special education meetings. Our blue skies, as you will see on the right-hand side, our ongoing needs is truly getting to a fully facilitated special education process with the METs and the IEPs. And phase 1 this year is we've established an expectation of agendas. We've provided some model examples. And as our leadership team is joining teams, if we're able to add some of those facilitation flares, we hope to. That is absolutely a great need that we need to continue and to expand that to just beyond the agendas, but the value of what that does allowing for meaningful input. So continued intentionality in developing a skill set of facilitation for the MET and IEPs. Increasing communication, it is everywhere. We recognize that that needs to be something we do better, we do more intentionally, and we do in a way that our teams are able to receive the information which we give. We continue to evaluate roles and responsibility within the department to build that capacity. One thing we realized collectively in the programs review is that we have a lot of great experts on our team, and just over the years, they have remained the one expert on our team. And so oftentimes if somebody is out, if someone unexpectedly is no longer with us, that skill set, that expertise, that understanding of that system, that platform of the student information system, that also is lost with that colleague no longer being with us or out for a couple of days. So building that capacity within our team and sharing that intentionality of the work so that there's that cross training and opportunity for us to expand on that. We need to continue conducting our learning walks. We are doing that not only with the SOFG, we'll continue doing that with our corrective reading and reading mastery team, which I'll highlight here shortly. Continue the facilitation of special education meetings, and again, continue to streamline the resources, documents, and websites so our teams have access to that. That's well and easy to navigate and find the information they need. Appropriate resources for specially designed instruction accomplished to date. Thank you, Governing Board, for your support of the Special Education Task Force recommendation for the reading program, McGraw-Hill Reading Mastery and Corrective Reading. We are in implementation on that, and we're very excited to have that information up and running. And we are partnering right now with McGraw-Hill to provide that coaching cycle with our instructional coaches. We're a little bit thin and not quite on the pace to hit every single classroom that we intended to at Q1, but that goal is still going strong, and we're prioritizing that work in semester 2 as an ongoing need. Continue customizing that professional development. What is it that we see that we need, especially in response to the data that we're collecting, not only from visiting the classrooms, gaining teacher input, but additionally looking at the SOFG Learning Walk data. How can we support that and customize that within our special education programs as well? Also continue to evaluate those curricular resources so our colleagues, our teachers in the classroom have the tools they need to meet the needs of their students as well. Looking at those effective instructional practices, again, learning walks, increase our instructional coaching, implement a corrective reading and reading mastery within our special education programs. We're also working directly, and we'll highlight that in our professional development, we're working directly with our program specialists of the Department of Education for our preschool teams, both community and developmental preschool, working on those early learning best practices. Not only are we inviting those experts in throughout the year to provide the direct instruction from those experts at Department of Education, we're working directly with our teachers to develop our own best practices and look for us in the classroom, and that's done in a collaborative way. And we're building that together and then reviewing that data together as we look at those best early learning practices. And continuing those learning walks, continuing those coaching cycles, not just visiting the classroom, but truly one-on-one with our teams to identify what those needs are and continue to be responsive to the needs of the data, the needs of our teams to customize that professional development. As I mentioned before, the continued collaboration of we as Creighton, collaborating with our curriculum and instruction and assessment teams and coaches. As I mentioned before, throughout the year, I think we have at least two more sessions with our McGraw-Hill expert to come in to provide that coaching. Not only are we doing learning walks with our McGraw-Hill team, but we're also providing on those Wednesdays for Creighton professional learning. We're also providing that tailored ongoing 4 times a year follow-up after learning walk data is collected in the special education classrooms to build that professional development based on the needs and implementation plan of our teams. And as I mentioned before, working with the Department of Education to support our developmental and our community programs, early learning best practices, and as well the feedback from some of the summer work with our colleague then Alan and one of our school psychologists, Ann Henry, of building us that system for supporting that tier 2 data collection, understanding what that looks like. The feedback was so strong that we also brought it back to our learning this year. So we have our Creighton professional learning, that's also 4 times a year. We have stakeholder groups, general education, our school psychologists, also accessible to that tier 2 behavior supports within the classroom throughout the year. continue to develop that customized professional development plan, to look at those instructional strategies and use of resources. And again, you'll hear me say that again, but it's something we believe in so deeply. We need to get in the classrooms and support our teachers directly with our students. Pardon me for going fast okay. Thank
You're
you. It is who I naturally am. So, and I get really excited. And when I get excited, I speed up a little bit too. So thank you for your grace on that. Priority 6, looking and engaging and empowering our families. We have established the Special Education Family Advisory Council, our CFAC. Not only have we established it, but we've really, as a collective team with our families, identified our purpose, which is working together to strengthen a solid foundation of diversity that empowers students to be strong, independent learners. That with our colleagues in the CFAC council, in the CFAC committee, we do meet regularly. We're looking at increasing supports within our health services department, similar to seeing an increase in our students who are identified in special education. As identified this year, we're just under 14%. We're also noticing that some of the student needs are really unique and are requiring not just tapping into our child find team, but also tapping into our nurses and our medical professionals, and to see them work directly the unique needs, collaborating with families, collaborating with parental consent, with doctors, to really understand and tailor the medical needs. So that is not a barrier for students to access. The campus has been really impressive. So I'm really proud to brag on the work our nurses and medical staff are doing. And again, as I mentioned before, by establishing the use of agendas within the special education meeting does allow for a meeting structure for meaningful input from each member of the team, including our families at those meetings. Ongoing needs is continue the momentum, increase the CFAC membership, and continue to build the capacity and understanding what those facilitated special education meetings. And I'd like to extend that as well. That very much could also mean 504 meetings. It's the structure of facilitation. Madam President, governing board members, while I am very proud of the accomplishments we've made in the past 10 months, I stand here humbly recognizing that we have a long way to go. And our team is committed to that long way to go, because we believe in the work and we believe in the students. And in which to do so, I'd like to propose some recommendations for your consideration, please. The recommendations are to reclassify 2 coordinators to our 2 managers of exceptional student services. In looking at our staffing, as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, one of our coordinators, Alan Hirsch, served in that coordinator position, and there was a restructuring, a parity study that happened before I arrived, and I would yield to leadership to explain if there's any additional questions on that, that allowed for that work to happen at a different salary schedule. The coordinator position, also when we're looking at the needs of our district, we're also looking at the needs for coordinator versus manager. The work is very different, and I'll explain why. When we're looking at the need to focus on our instruction and to focus on the time in the classroom, the work of the coordinator really covered too much of that instructional coach and that teacher on assignment. And what we need to look as identified in our ongoing needs are those structural, building that capacity, supporting our team in the systems. And that is one of the reasons why I'm making the recommendation to move the coordinator position to a manager. For a more competitive salary schedule, to attract people that have that skill set and have that heart and knowledge to meet those needs that identified in those deficiencies, as well as to really better articulate that scope of work that aligns to the work we need with our department to make those moves for our students. Additionally, the request and recommendation is to hire an additional instructional coach. For a myriad of reasons, as I mentioned before, we believe and want to prioritize that work and protect our instructional coach from doing coordinator and manager duties that we're currently doing right now because of the staffing shortages, but also really restructuring that to protect their time, as I mentioned, to get that increased time in the classroom in true coaching cycles, not just visiting and popping in, but that cycle of modeling and coaching and looking at that implementation of instructional practices and curriculum. And additionally, when we're looking at strong collaboration of We Are Creighton and focusing on the SOFG to align with the model within the curriculum and instruction coaching model as well. Our recommendations, we have work to do to continue to evaluate our department roles to align to resources with needs. We need to continue to increase capacity within our team. I sit on the leadership team with so many great experts, and we need to continue to understand what each of those experts are. And I can say very transparently, my colleague Dorothy Green is one of the departments and districts expert in preschool. That is the new learning for me, and I'm humbled by what she has teaching me, what she's teaching me, what I need to continue to learn. So I'm grateful for her time and looking at that. How do we continue to build that capacity so the work is shared and the work gets done in a way that's equitable and meets the needs of our families and teams. And lastly, we need to continue to evaluate systems and methods of service delivery to maximize efficiency and impact on student achievement. We have a proficiency of our students with disabilities at 5% for reading and math. Our state average is hovering right around the past trend data, past couple of years, hovering around between 12, 11 to 15%. We also are currently identified through our federal monitoring system that we are targeted school improvement for our students with disabilities, that they continue to underperform to the rate of other students identified with special needs. And our students with disabilities continue to lag in achievement and outcomes compared to their typical peers. So when we look at continuing to evaluate the work which we do, we are protecting our time with our teachers. We are protecting our time with our instructional coaches. So we will continue and be committed to reevaluating how are we spending our time on the leadership team to prioritize that work in the classroom. If I may provide, thank you for your grace and keeping up with my pace of speech. The proposed organizational structure will look then similar to this. So we started where we were at the first slide, and then the vision of how do we really start making an impact to moving that needle for high student outcomes. This would be that new organizational structure that I just explained and asking for consideration as my recommendation moving forward.
Industry-wise, I guess, I know this is kind of like a personnel HR thing in terms of, and industry in terms of manager, coordinator, teaching and learning coach. So I guess my curiosity is, essentially, I know you kind of got into the difference between the manager and the coordinator, but then I'm wondering, what's the gap between a coordinator and a teaching and learning coach? And if we're going to not have any coordinators, is there another gap that's going to need to be filled down the road, or how does all of that fit together?
Well, yeah, no, which one?
Tag team.
Thank you.
Whatever.
I think one of the differences between the coordinator and the manager position is the supervision piece, and that would be directly related to how the support for the coaches would be distributed among the managers. So there was that position that was sort of part of the work that Alan did, but wasn't really operationalized as a coordinator, whereas the manager position really is a supervisory position in addition to all of the other things that Ms. Kaiser had shared.
Certainly, okay.
Board Member Gibbs McLean, we did in that consideration of what does that work look like, and looking at those job descriptions to say what truly meets the need of the work ahead. Very transparently, I did consider and did have thought partners to look at what does that structure meet that's fiscally responsible and does meet the need, and that still yielded the conversion, the reclassification to the two managers.
And forgive my ignorance, but you did mention that through the federal department, we are below average, right? Do we get additional funding because we are at that level? And are those funds, what can those funds actually be used for?
Thank you. Dr. Dupin, I know we've been working collaboratively with you with our AD specialist. Would you mind jumping in and explaining that a little bit?
I'll do my best.
Thank you.
There's a formula no one understands.
Precisely.
We will get access to additional funds to support our CSI targeted needs. The difference, though, is that the funds directly to the school level.
Okay.
They're for use at the school level. They don't filter through the district. Whereas the CSI comprehensive school improvement grant that we got at the district level, that's what we used to fund all of the stipends for the lead teachers. We could do that as a district wide structure, whereas with the CSIT, it'll be targeted to the school level. We will still have a great deal of input into how that's prioritized, but there's going to be a lot of site involvement in how that works. And I'm not sure when we get access to those dollars. We'll find out.
And our teams are currently collaborating with the school site, and our instructional coaches are joining in many of those meetings as well.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And they're not, I do want to say real quick, since we're on this topic, they're not dollars that could really be utilized for personnel.
Yeah, I
purposes.
figured.
Thank you, Dr. Dugan. Thank you, Dr. Lauren.
Do we have any other questions or wonderings? Yeah,
Yeah,
Ms.
I have a
Shepherd.
question. I mean, I should know this, but what is the difference between the gen ed home instruction and then special ed homebound instruction? And how do parents or students that need it, how do they find out about it here in Creighton? Because I think it's different
Yeah.
district to district.
Thank you, Ms. Bishopry, for that question. The distinct difference is looking at a student identified at general education or identified with special education. So home instruction, there could be a myriad of reasons why a student, a general education student, is unable to attend school, whether it be medically, whether it be other needs. And our homebound instruction is looking at that specialized instruction for students identified with IEPs. So very similar process, but is a little bit different because we're supporting under FAPE, a little bit different process for special education than general education, but similar. And they both come through our department. So if anyone does have additional questions, and we can happy to support that or to help identify if someone's unsure what those requirements are, what those needs are, we're happy to support.
Okay, so from a practical standpoint, say someone is going through cancer treatment or something and can't physically make it to school, how do our parents know that that is an option? Like, how do we capture them? You may not know. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I
a
can
really
share
good
what my
example.
typical experience
Sure.
has been, because I've kind of, I've had a variety of different roles at a variety of different districts. And in many cases, it's intersected with some of those students because I spent a fair bit of time in technology at several districts. And a lot of times it was the technology tool set that created connections for those students. Very often, it's through a conversation that happens at the school site where a parent will come in and say, my child's not going to be able to be here for 6 months because they're either going to be at home convalescing or they're going to be checked in at Phoenix Children's Hospital. And typically in those cases, it's sort of the internal communication structure within the district that connects those families to the available services, either with special education, or in my case, I had some experiences where we were leveraging iPads for video conferencing into the classroom to be able to connect students to their classroom peers and not have them lose that connectivity during their treatment period, or whatever that might be. And so some of the things that Ms. Kaiser talked about earlier in relation to the efforts that are being put into strengthening those ties between the department and the schools, and that feeling of, well, who do I talk to about this, is really, in those cases, it's very magnified, because what you don't want to see happening is a parent comes in, they're distraught, like my kid's got to have bone marrow transplants or something like that, and then at the school site they're like, well, I should be connecting with somebody district office, but I don't know who that is, right? Because that can create delays in being able to get those resources to those families. I don't know if Dr. Dupin, if you have any alternate experience or corrections.
The only thing I would add to it is that there have been occasions when families don't self-report, tragically. So in those cases, it's incumbent upon the staff at the school, when they're monitoring attendance, usually ideally, parents are contacted on a daily basis if an absence goes unreported. But after a period of time of absence, a day, 2, 3 days, outreach is made to connect with the families, or attempts at outreach are made to connect with the families to figure out what's going on. And so usually it's through that interface that families will say, well, this is what we're dealing with, and then we can dispatch family resources, our effective, I'm tired, our wonderful CEOs, our community engagement and outreach specialists, and then connect through the ESS department to engage homebound service.
If I can add also from my experience, often Phoenix Children's Hospitals are a really good example. They are proactive with their social workers and their teachers, because they have teachers on staff, that they will be working with the families to make sure that they're having that communication. That's a two-way communication. And I've found that can be a very successful model for some students as well.
Great. Thank you.
And while we're talking about related to like some of those medical concerns, it's actually not far off from some of the processes that Mr. Carvajal's connected to in relation to homelessness or other types of displacement issues for our families. And it is an area that is often a struggle, because when a family goes offline, sometimes by the time you realize this has been an extended period of absence, there might be communication challenges. And so it's certainly an area where I think we have a desire to be strong in, but there's always some room for continued improvement.
I know, like, in my experience working with Phoenix Children, like, I sometimes had to reach out, but then once I did, like, their staff is amazing, and they'll, have transition plans and things like that. They have the resources, but sometimes it takes I had my human, and then that human moved to another job, and then I'm like, so similarly with people here, knowing who to go to in the department, it's making sure we have connections, because they do have a ton of resources for those cases.
And I'll echo Executive Team Superintendent Mann. Really, our school teams are such great advocates. The teachers recognizing someone's not there, our school nurses coming in because there's a concern about a chronic health issue or need, or the principals reaching out because they see someone at pickup and there's conversation. So I really do echo leadership explaining that, that credit our school teams for recognizing the need for us to respond in a different way.
I just have a other random question. Does the Student Services Department, do you also service gifted students?
No, we don't. Sorry, Dr. Dupin.
Those gifted services are under curriculum
Correct.
instruction.
Under
and
curriculum.
assessment.
Okay, that's what I thought.
They used to be. We
Yeah.
moved them under curriculum, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago.
That's what I thought. I just couldn't remember.
And it's one of those things that varies district to
Yes.
district. Some districts it is, and others.
Yes. Great question.
Do we have any other
I
questions?
just had a comment. So thank you very much for the thoroughness in this. I've been concerned about this department for a long time, and Mr. Mann and I have talked, and it's a very, very challenging many different needs, and I think it will not ever be perfect. That's just the nature of this. But I do recognize improvements that I have heard staff asking for, and I know we're still in a huge challenge because we're so understaffed, which is, I believe happened because we've had a broken system for a while. So there is going to take some rebuilding to do, and I know that's really kind of where we're at right now, but I appreciate the recommendations, the things that have gone into place, like the resources, the curriculum resources. That was something that was being asked for, and then all of the other things. So I appreciate this very much, and all the hard work that you guys have all been working on.
Thank you. And
recognizing that there's still a lot
yes,
of work
yes,
to do.
ma'am.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. And I really just look back and I'm so proud to be on the team. I'll tell you that. I'm so proud to be on the team because of
None
the
of you
colleagues
can
I-
eat, especially you, Dorothy.
that I have the privilege to work with.
No.
I was gonna say, I don't know what you knew you were stepping into a year ago, or if you knew anything, but I really appreciate all of the time and energy that's been put into trying to figure things out, or at least get a lay of the land and then figure out where to guide things. And I know you're giving credit to your team, but it takes someone to come in and have that leadership to figure out kind of the landscape and figure out where things need to go. So I really appreciate that. I appreciate all this. This is like all great information and just so informative. And I just look forward to things continuing to improve. And on a side note, I used to love listening to Dr. Lauren, because like I said, his voice was like ASMR, and I found myself in the same space again, feeling very relaxed listening to you speak here. And I kept thinking, I need to not fall asleep, and not because this is boring, but just because of how relaxing your voice.
Well, I always tell myself to be mindful when you get excited, slow down, but I was excited. So I appreciate your grace in that. Thank you for that.
It was great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Any other questions or comments?
I just wanted to say that there was a list of questions, comments, concerns that I did get from teachers. In time, I just, I texted Mr. Mann and asked him to find those answers to those questions because I also don't want to bombard you with a bunch of things that maybe you don't know the answers to, but I think they're really relevant. So maybe you could give a update to the person on that text that I sent to you, and then just update to the board on some of those questions and comments and concerns.
We can include it in the board update, and we'll certainly
Yeah.
close the loop on that. I think there may be, just at glancing at it, there may be a few misunderstandings because there were some places like, well, where is, we're not seeing this, and it's like, well, it's in the column that says working on, right? So there may be some assumptions like, well, this one's done, and yet some of those things were identified as this is yet to come. But we can easily kind of approach all of those and give a status update and share that both with the board and with folks that are asking those questions. And I just want to also add that the structure of this board meeting's a little bit out of the norm because we've traditionally put like this manager position into consent, but we felt it wasn't really the right pathway to say, hey, can you approve this? And then find out from Ms. Kaiser why you might be interested in approving this. And also rather than just, kind of standing on principle and going, well, it goes in consent and you'll have to move it if you want it after the presentation. We've just placed it into personnel, which follows educational services. But I wanted to point out the connection between the two items because, that is in this restructure, that is one of the steps. If the board's in favor of making these adjustments, that's one of the ways. We'll put it back into our SOFG terminology. It's an input that you can approve to help create the outcomes that we're hoping to create for our special education student subpopulation.
Before we do that, just another thing that occurred to me, and it goes with the vein of the communication and the structures. I think this was really informative, and it might be worth just sharing this slide deck with not just special education teachers, but the gen ed teachers as well, because they often have students with special needs in their classrooms, just to help kind of that continuous loop of communication and let people know, it's great that there are specific people that reached out asking questions. There's probably a dozen more that have the same questions. So
Thank you for that recommendation. Board members, thank you for that feedback. Look forward to being able to respond well to those inquiries. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
That brings us to 8A, which is approve the job description for manager of exceptional student services department. I move the governing board approve the job description for manager of exceptional student services department.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion has passed, and hopefully we can fulfill those two vacant positions as soon as possible. Any future agenda items? Just keep an eye that our board study session will be February 22nd, and it's going to be a very informative one. So hopefully everybody can make themselves available for that. I do not have any other future agenda items here.
February 22nd.
Second,
22nd?
correct.
Okay, sorry.
222.
Alignment numbers. All right, seeing no other questions or no other future agenda items, I move the governing board adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Muchísimas gracias. Buenas noches.
I'm done. Yeah, I just thought that's right. Yeah.
It's absolutely fine. I mean, we have no qualms with answering. Just when I was flipping through
No,
them.
but I don't want to I didn't understand a lot of them.
Yeah.
To ask them. I thought that was weird. And I just didn't want to bombard.
And I think part of the reason you don't understand them is because they literally were questions that teachers that they haven't had this training. It's like it's future.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yes, you too.
Yeah. Bye.